I had been planning this trip for 6 months, 2 weeks alone in the mountains. No phone, no people, no reminders of the divorce. I had no idea I had picked the last weekend. The world would be normal. The Friday afternoon sun hit my driveway in northeast Portland just right, catching the chrome on my Land Cruiser's front bumper. I had spent the better part of 3 years modifying this beast: lifted suspension, reinforced chassis, custom winch mount. My ex-wife used to call it my midlife crisis on wheels. I called it engineering potato potato. I loaded the last of my gear methodically: camping equipment, check. Toolkit that would make a NASCAR crew jealous, check. Emergency supplies that probably made me look like a doomsday prepper, check. Hell, maybe I was. But when you grow up in the Pacific Northwest, you learn real quick that Mother Nature doesn't care about your cell phone battery or your AAA membership. The radio played in the background while I worked. Some local news station droning on about violent incidents downtown, and hospitals dealing with unexpected patient surges, urban problems. The kind of chaos I was specifically leaving behind for 2 glorious weeks of silence at my buddy's cabin up in the Cascades. No exes, no lawyers, no reminders that I would apparently prioritize my hobbies over emotional availability. Yeah, well, my hobbies never cheated on me with a CrossFit instructor named Brad. So there is that. Traffic heading out of the city was heavier than usual for a Friday afternoon. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, watching the brake lights ahead stretch into the distance like a river of red. An accident up ahead had traffic crawling. When I finally passed it, something felt off. The cars were crumpled in a way that suggested high speed. But what really caught my attention was the ambulance crew struggling with someone on a stretcher. The person was thrashing so violently it took 4 EMTs to hold them down. Drugs probably, or bath salts. Wasn't that a thing a few years back? I turned up the radio to drown out my thoughts. Classic rock station. Something about living on a prayer felt appropriate. My phone buzzed just as I crossed the Portland city limits emergency alert. I glanced down at the screen mounted on my dash. Emergency alert. Shelter in place. Do not approach anyone exhibiting aggressive behavior. Await further instructions. Asterisk, asterisk. I looked in my rearview mirror at the city skyline shrinking behind me, then ahead to the open highway stretching toward the mountains. Well, I muttered to the empty cab. Too late for that. The gas station sat alone at the intersection of Highway 26 and some county road that probably had a number instead of a name. One of those places that sold bait beer and diesel, the holy trinity of rural America. I needed to top off the tank before hitting the serious mountain roads. The cruiser could go far on a full tank, but far becomes relative when you are climbing elevation, and the next station might be 50 miles away. The parking lot was empty except for an old Chevy pickup and what looked like a Honda Civic that had seen better decades. No other customers. That wasn't unusual out here. But something felt wrong. The fluorescent lights inside the station flickered in a way that made my mechanic brain immediately think bad ballast. But it was the smell that really got me. Copper. Sweet and metallic, riding on the afternoon breeze. I stepped out of the cruiser slowly, my hand instinctively going to the tire iron. I kept mounted inside the doorframe. Old habit from years of roadside breakdowns in sketchy neighborhoods. The pump looked functional enough, so I started filling up, keeping my eyes on the station's front door. That is when Frank appeared. I had stopped here before, maybe 3 or 4 times over the years. Frank was the owner, 60-something, weathered face. Always had a story about fishing or the time he almost got recruited by the Mariners. Good guy. Sold me a fan belt once when mine snapped 30 miles from nowhere. The thing stumbling out of that door wasn't Frank anymore. His flannel shirt was soaked black-red down the front. One arm hung at an angle that made my stomach turn compound fracture, bone showing white against torn flesh. But it was his face that froze me. Eyes completely bloodshot. Not just red but dark, like every blood vessel had burst at once. His mouth hung open, jaw working soundlessly, and I could see where something had taken a chunk out of his neck. "Frank," my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Jesus, man, what happened? We need to get you to a..." He moved faster than anything that broken should move. 1 second he was swaying in the doorway. The next he was covering the 20 feet between us with this awful lurching sprint. No recognition in those ruined eyes. No humanity. Just hunger. The tire iron was in my hand before I consciously decided to grab it. 34 years of life, and I would never hit another human being with serious intent. But when Frank's fingers curled into claws, nails caked with dried blood reached for my throat. Instinct took over. The iron connected with his temple with a sound I will never forget, like hitting a watermelon with a baseball bat. Frank went down hard, but not out. He was already scrambling to get back up, that broken arm dragging beneath him, when I hit him again and again. I am not proud of what happened next. I just know that when it was over, Frank wasn't getting up anymore, and I was bent over the side of my cruiser, throwing up everything I had eaten that day. A sound from the station made me spin around, iron raised. A woman emerged, or what used to be a woman. Her grocery store uniform was shredded, and she had the same dead eyes, the same broken but moving wrongness. She opened her mouth and this sound came out, not a scream, not a moan. Something in between that made every hair on my body stand up. I didn't wait around for introductions. I was in the cruiser with the engine roaring before she made it halfway across the lot. The gas pump ripped free, still pumping as I tore out of there, fuel spraying across the concrete. In my mirror, I watched her shamble after me for a few steps before she seemed to lose interest, turning back toward the station. My hands shook so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I fumbled with the radio, cycling through stations. The classic rock was gone. Every channel was either emergency broadcast or static. Martial law in effect for the following counties: Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington, Marion. Click. Do not engage with infected individuals. Repeat, do not engage. They are extremely dangerous. And click. Reports of similar outbreaks in Seattle, Vancouver, and as far south as Eugene. The infection rate is click. All roads into Portland are now closed. If you are outside the city, do not attempt to return. Shelter in place and await. I turned off the radio. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own breathing, ragged and too fast. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, my phone buzzed repeatedly with missed calls, texts, alerts. I looked at the road ahead, then at the column of black smoke rising in my rearview mirror, somewhere in the direction of Portland. The cabin was still 140 miles away. The tank showed 3/4 full. I kept driving north. Highway 26 had turned into a graveyard. Cars abandoned in the middle of lanes, some with doors hanging open like the occupants had just vanished mid-escape. Others were crashed into guardrails, trees, each other. The infected, because that is what they were. No point in pretending otherwise, wandered between the vehicles like shoppers in some nightmare department store. I had slowed to a crawl, weaving between the obstacles. The cruiser could handle rough terrain, but I wasn't about to risk a blowout with a dozen of those things within running distance. They didn't all react to the vehicle the same way. Some ignored it completely. Others turned to track it with those dead eyes. A few even started shambling toward the sound of the engine. I learned real quick that slow and steady won this particular race. That is when I heard it. A yowling sound, high-pitched and desperate, coming from an overturned sedan about 30 yards ahead. The car was on its side and I could see movement inside. Not the infected kind of movement. This was frantic, alive, and thoroughly pissed off. 3 infected were circling the sedan like sharks. One was trying to reach through the broken windshield, its arms scraping against the glass still embedded in the frame. I should have kept driving, should have told myself that whatever was in that car was already dead, or would be soon enough. Survival 101. Don't be a hero. But then I saw the flash of orange fur, and the yowl came again. And I thought about how quiet it had been in my cruiser. How much quieter it was going to get. This is the dumbest thing you have ever done, Ryder, I muttered, then laid on the horn. The effect was immediate, and exactly what I hoped for. All 3 infected snapped their attention to me. That same uncanny speed, and started moving toward the cruiser. I threw it in reverse, drew them away from the sedan, then circled around wide. The moment they were far enough away, I gunned it toward the overturned car. No time for finesse. I grabbed my tire iron, jumped out, and ran to the sedan. Inside, pressed against the roof. Now the side was the scrawniest orange tabby cat I had ever seen. It was absolutely losing its mind, claws out, fur puffed up to twice its normal size, hissing at everything that moved, including me. Yeah, well, screw you too, buddy, I grunted, reaching through the broken window. The cat swiped at me, caught the sleeve of my jacket. We doing this or not? Because those things are coming back and I am not dying for your ungrateful. The cat must have sensed my sincerity, or maybe it just realized I was the lesser evil, because it suddenly went limp and let me grab it. I pulled it free just as the first infected rounded the front of the car. Back in the cruiser, cat tucked under one arm. Door slammed, locks engaged. The infected slammed against the driver's side window hard enough to crack my teeth together. Up close, I could see the details I had missed before the burst capillaries. The way their eyes didn't quite focus. The gray pale color of their skin. But it was the teeth that got me. Normal human teeth. Nothing special. Nothing monster movie fangs. Just regular teeth that had torn into regular human flesh. I hit the gas and we were moving again, leaving the frustrated infected pawing at empty air. The cat had climbed onto the dashboard and was now sitting there, perfectly calm, like we hadn't just escaped death by seconds. It looked at me with these bright green eyes, tilted its head, and meowed once. Not panicked, not grateful. Just acknowledging. You are welcome, I said. The cat started cleaning its paw. Over the next hour, as I navigated the increasingly apocalyptic highway, I started to notice something weird. Every time I was about to make a wrong move, getting too close to an abandoned car that might have infected inside, taking a turn that led to a blocked road, the cat would tense up, ears back, body low. Sometimes a low growl in its throat. And every time, when I followed its lead and went the other way, things worked out. Coincidence? Probably. Cats are weird, but out here, with the world falling apart around me, I would take weird coincidences over bad luck. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in colors that were way too beautiful for the end of the world, I pulled off onto a logging road to make some modifications to the cruiser. I had been thinking about this since Frank's gas station. The windows were the weakness. I needed protection fast. I found an abandoned construction site, orange cones, portable toilets, the whole 9 yards. In the equipment shed, I hit the jackpot, chain link fencing, metal posts, zip ties, even a cordless drill with a full battery. The cat watched from the hood of the cruiser as I worked, reinforcing the windows with mesh. It wouldn't stop a determined assault, but it would slow down anyone or anything trying to reach through broken glass. I also welded some metal brackets onto the roof rack, creating mount points for tools that could be grabbed quick. Weapons my brain supplied helpfully. You are creating weapon mounts. The work helped, kept my hands busy. kept my mind from replaying Frank's skull cracking under the tire iron. I was finishing up the passenger side when I heard voices. Human voices. My first instinct was relief other survivors. Maybe we could team up, share information. Then I remembered Frank and thought better of it. A young couple appeared on the road, waving frantically. Early 20s, college kids maybe. The guy was carrying a baseball bat. The girl had a kitchen knife. They looked terrified. "Please," the girl shouted, "please. We saw your lights. We have been walking for hours. Our car ran out of gas and those things," the guy cut in. "Do you have room? We just need to get to Salem. My parents are there. We just need a ride." I looked at them, looked at the cruiser, looked at the cat, who had climbed onto the driver's seat and was staring at me with those green eyes. Every fiber of my being said no, said this was a mistake, said that my ex-wife was right. I couldn't save everyone, couldn't fix everything, just because I had the tools and the know-how. But they looked so young, so scared. "Get in the back," I heard myself say. "Quick." The relief on their faces was immediate. They ran toward the cruiser, the guy reaching for the rear door handle. And that is when the infected came out of the construction site. Not one or two, a dozen, maybe more, pouring out of the portable toilets, the equipment shed, the half-built foundation. They had been in there the whole time, maybe drawn by the sound of my drilling, just waiting. "Run," I shouted, diving for the driver's door. "Get to the vehicle now." But they panicked. Instead of running straight for the cruiser, the girl turned back toward the road, and the guy followed her. Wrong direction, wrong choice. I fired up the engine, laid on the horn, trying to draw the infected toward me and away from them. A few turned, but most were locked on to the running couple. The infected moved with that horrible fast, slow shamble. Not quite running, but somehow keeping pace. The couple made it maybe 30 yards before the girl tripped. I don't want to describe what happened next. I will just say that I learned you cannot unhear certain sounds, cannot unsee certain things. And when it was over, and the infected were busy with what they had found, I drove away. The cat, I couldn't keep thinking of it as the cat sat in the passenger seat watching me. Not judging, just watching. "Shadow," I said quietly. The name felt right, something that stayed close, that moved quietly, that was there when you needed it. Shadow blinked slowly, then curled up on the seat and went to sleep. I drove through the night, my hands steady on the wheel, my eyes dry, my mind carefully blank. Alone again, except this time I had a witness, and a promise to myself. No more Good Samaritans, no more risks for strangers. From now on, it was just me, Shadow, and the road. The fork in the road appeared just after dawn, right where my outdated GPS said it would. To the left, Highway 26 continued 4 lanes of what used to be civilization's main artery into the mountains. Fast, direct, and absolutely crawling with abandoned vehicles. And where there were abandoned vehicles, there were probably infected to the right. A narrow county road disappeared into dense forest, the kind of road that logging trucks used, that didn't appear on most maps, that would add probably 50 miles and several hours to my trip. I pulled to a stop at the junction, engine idling, trying to think strategically. The highway would be faster if it was clear. Big if the mountain road would be slower, but potentially safer. Less population out that way meant fewer infected. Shadow, who had been asleep on the passenger seat for the past hour, suddenly sat up. She hopped onto the dashboard, looked at both routes, then at me, then very deliberately started pawing at the right side of the windshield. The mountain road. "Yeah?" I asked. "You sure about that?" She meowed once, hopped back onto the seat, and started cleaning her paws like the matter was settled. I was about to choose the highway anyway, because since when do I take tactical advice from a cat? When I caught sight of something in the distance, the highway rose slightly about a mile ahead. And at the crest of that rise, I could just make out shapes, vehicles, lots of them, and movement. I pulled out my binoculars from the door pocket. Through the lens, the scene became horrifyingly clear. A military checkpoint, or what was left of one. Humvees arranged in a barrier pattern, concertina wire everywhere, and infected dozens of them swarming over and around the vehicles. Some in uniform, some civilian, all dead and walking right. Mountain Road it is. Shadow didn't even look smug about it, just curled back up and went to sleep. The first few miles of the county road were rough but manageable. The cruiser's suspension handled the potholes and washouts without complaint. I had built this thing for terrain like this. Had spent weekends testing it on trails that would make a Jeep owner cry, finally getting to use all those modifications for actual survival instead of just fun felt weirdly validating. About an hour in, I encountered my first infected on the mountain road. Just one, a middle-aged man in hiking gear. Probably got caught up in the initial chaos while trying to escape to the wilderness. Like me, he turned at the sound of my engine, started that shambling run toward the vehicle. I had a choice. Swerve around him, plenty of room. Or test something I had been thinking about since the modifications. I chose to test. The cruiser hit him going about 30 miles per hour. The reinforced bull bar I had welded to the front did its job. His body crumpled and went under the wheels with a sickening double thump. I checked the mirror. He wasn't getting up. The vehicle had barely felt it. I pulled over a quarter-mile down the road, got out, and inspected the damage. Nothing. A dent in the bull bar, some biological matter. I really didn't want to examine closely. But the cruiser itself was fine. The windows I had reinforced held solid. The mounts I had created for quick weapons access were secure. I had just turned my vehicle into a mobile fortress, and it worked. A dangerous feeling of confidence started creeping in. I had survived the initial outbreak, rescued Shadow, escaped multiple infected encounters, and now I had proof that my preparations weren't just paranoid engineering, they were effective. I got back in the cruiser feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could do this. 3 more encounters over the next 20 miles reinforced that confidence. A small group of 4 infected trying to surround a pickup truck. I scattered them with the vehicle, drove through without stopping. Another solo infected on the road, same treatment, same result. Each time, the cruiser proved itself. Each time, I felt more in control. By the time I stopped for the night, I had covered maybe 40 miles of mountain road. The cabin was still 80 miles away, give or take. I had enough fuel to make it, assuming no major detours. Supplies for a week. Maybe 2 if I rationed. Shadow had shown she could catch mice. I had watched her nail one in the parking lot of an abandoned ranger station where I had stopped to stretch. I set up camp inside the cruiser. Windows cracked for air but mesh reinforcements providing security. Shadow curled up on the passenger seat, purring like a diesel engine. As I was drifting off, I did the math one more time. 80 miles at mountain road speeds. Maybe 2 days. Food, water, fuel, all good. The infected were dangerous, but manageable with the vehicle. I had figured out the basic rules. They respond to sound and movement. They are individually weak but dangerous in groups, and they can be killed with enough blunt force trauma. I had made it this far. I could make the rest. That is when Shadow's purring stopped. Her ears swiveled toward the window, and a low growl started in her throat. I went still, listening. At first, nothing. Then I heard it, the shuffle of feet on gravel, multiple sets, and breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. Slowly, I reached for the tire iron mounted next to my seat. In the darkness outside the cruiser, shapes moved. I counted at least 8 infected, maybe more, circling the vehicle like they had been drawn by the heat, or the smell, or some instinct I didn't understand. One of them pressed its face against the reinforced driver's side window, smearing the mesh with blood, and something worse. It opened its mouth, teeth scraping against the metal. I made that sound, the not quite moan that turned my stomach every time. I sat there in the darkness, tire iron in hand, shadow tense beside me, and waited for dawn. The confidence I had felt earlier evaporated. These things hunted at night. They tracked by senses I didn't understand. And my fortress on wheels was only safe as long as they couldn't get inside. In the morning, they were gone. Just vanished back into the forest like morning fog. But the message was clear. I wasn't as in control as I thought. And the road ahead was still long. The reality of post-apocalyptic survival hit me on day 6. I was running low on everything that mattered. Gas was down to half a tank. Food was rationed to the point where Shadow and I were eyeing each other's portions with mutual suspicion. And I needed more than just supplies, I needed information. The abandoned vehicles dotting the mountain roads weren't just obstacles anymore. They were resource nodes, like some twisted survival video game. Each one potentially held fuel, food, tools, or information. Each one potentially held infected. The first vehicle I decided to scavenge was a Suburban, pulled off onto a scenic overlook. Probably someone who had stopped to take in the view and never left. The way the doors hung open suggested a hasty exit. The blood on the driver's seat suggested it hadn't gone well. I approached with the cruiser, using it as a mobile barrier between me and any potential threats. Shadow sat on the dashboard, her tail twitching, not the aggressive twitch from earlier encounters, more of an interested curiosity. "You see anything, you let me know," I told her. She flicked an ear at me. I chose to interpret that as agreement. The Suburban's fuel tank was 3/4 full. I siphoned it using a length of hose I had grabbed from the ranger station, a skill I had learned from a YouTube video years ago for reasons I couldn't remember. Funny how useless knowledge becomes essential. In the back seat, I found a cache of camping supplies. Freeze-dried meals, water purification tablets, a first aid kit that was actually stocked with useful stuff. Someone had been prepared, hadn't helped them, but it would help me. Then I found the notebook. It was wedged under the passenger seat, a weathered moleskine with observations written on the cover in Sharpie. I flipped it open. The first entry was dated 3 days after the outbreak started. "Faye, they don't sleep. Watched one from the window for 6 hours. It just stood there, swaying. When a deer walked by, it moved so fast I barely saw it. The deer didn't stand a chance." Asterisk, I kept reading, sitting in the Suburban's passenger seat with Shadow in my lap. Faye, sound attracts them, but not all sound equally. Car alarms bring them running. Music doesn't seem to register unless it is loud. Talking regular conversation volume they respond to within 50 feet. Shouting is a death sentence. Asterisk, Faye movement attracts them more than sound. Saw a kid make it across a street by walking slow and steady, while a runner got mobbed. They key on fast movement. Asterisk, Faye, daylight doesn't bother them, but they are more active at night. Maybe they see better in low light, or maybe they are just drawn to the heat signatures that show up more in the dark. Asterisk, the last entry was dated 2 days ago. Just 2 words. Faye, they learned. Asterisk, I closed the notebook. A chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air they learned. What did that mean? Shadow suddenly went rigid in my lap, her ears flat against her head. The van. The growl was immediate. I looked up just in time to see the side panel of a cargo van parked 2 spaces away slide open, and 3 infected spill out like nightmare clowns from a clown car. They had been in there the whole time, and I had been so focused on the Suburban I hadn't checked. First rule of survival, clear the area before you commit. I had broken rule 1. Shadow launched herself out of my lap and toward the cruiser's open door. I was right behind her. the notebook clutched in one hand, the tire iron in the other. I made it to the cruiser half a second before the first infected reached me. The door slammed shut on grasping fingers. Literally, I heard bones crack, and I was throwing the vehicle into reverse before my brain caught up with my body. The infected slammed against the windows, the mesh reinforcements doing their job but bowing inward with each impact. I hit the gas hard, tires spraying gravel, and shot backward out of the parking area. One of the infected had managed to grab onto the roof rack. I could see its fingers through the reinforced back window, curled around the metal mounting points, knuckles white with the grip of something that didn't feel pain. I slammed on the brakes. Physics did the rest. The infected flew forward off the roof, tumbled across the gravel, and lay still for about 3 seconds before starting to crawl toward us again. "Okay," I said to Shadow, who was perched on the dashboard giving me a look that clearly said, "I know I told you so, Friday." I lesson learned. Clear first, scavenge second. Over the next 2 days, I refined my technique. Approach slowly. Use the cruiser as a shield. Send Shadow a scout. She had a better sense for danger than I did. And he was small enough to slip through broken windows and check interiors. It felt wrong, using a cat as a mine detector, but Shadow seemed to understand the game. She would go, sniff around, and either meow, "all clear," or hiss, "get the hell out." Her batting average was perfect. I found a sporting goods store in a small mountain town that looked like it had evacuated in a hurry. The front windows were smashed, but the interior was mostly intact. Shadow cleared it all clear, meow, and I went to work, hiking boots in my size, thermal clothes, a compound bow with a dozen arrows, because ammo was finite, but arrows could be recovered. A water filtration system, freeze-dried food that would last months, and in the back, in what must have been the owner's office, welding equipment. I spent 6 hours in that store, working by flashlight, welding metal plates to the cruiser's doors and hood. Not complete coverage that would make it too heavy, kill my fuel economy, strategic reinforcement, protecting the engine, the fuel tank, the critical systems. Shadow supervised from a shelf, occasionally knocking over a can of tennis balls, just to remind me she was bored. When I finished, the cruiser looked like something out of Mad Max, brutal, functional, and probably illegal in 48 states. I loved it. That night, camped in the store's parking lot, I read more of the survivor's notebook by flashlight. The entries painted a picture of someone who had studied the infected, tried to understand them. The last entry haunted me. They learned started out just following sound and movement. Now they are setting ambushes. Found 3 of them waiting inside a car I was going to scavenge. They had been quiet, still, waiting. That is not mindless. That is strategy. Asterisk, I looked out at the darkness beyond the mesh-reinforced windows. Shadow was alert, watching, her ears swiveling to track sounds I couldn't hear. Somewhere out there, the infected were learning, adapting, getting better at hunting, and I was getting better at surviving. The question was, who would adapt faster? I fell asleep with the notebook on my chest, Shadow curled against my side, and the reinforced cruiser keeping the darkness at bay. Tomorrow, I would continue north, 60 miles to the cabin. Enough fuel, enough food, enough knowledge to maybe make it. Maybe. The mountain pass opened up before me like something from a nature documentary, sweeping views of pine forests, snow-capped peaks in the distance, a narrow ribbon of asphalt cutting through the wilderness. It would have been breathtaking if I had any breath left to take. Shadow sat on the dashboard, her tail swishing in that particular way. That meant she was content. We had made good progress over the past 2 days, another 40 miles closer to the cabin. Fuel was manageable. Food was tight, but survivable. The infected encounters had been minimal, 1 or 2 solo wanderers that I would dealt with using the cruiser's new armor plating. I was actually starting to think we might make it. That is when I saw the roadblock. It looked official at first. Proper barriers, orange cones, even what appeared to be a police car parked at an angle across the road. A figure in a reflective vest was waving me down. The universal signal for official checkpoint. Please stop. Something felt wrong. Shadow tensed. Her ears went flat, and a low growl started in her throat. Not the infected warning, this was different. More aggressive. I slowed down anyway. What choice did I have? The road here was narrow. Steep forest on one side, sheer drop on the other. No way to turn around. No way to off-road past the checkpoint. The vested figure approached, and I could see it was a man. Maybe 40, weathered face, holding what looked like a walkie-talkie. He smiled, friendly, professional. Everything about his body language said, I am here to help. Then I saw the spike strip across the road, partially hidden behind the barriers. Shit. The word was out before I could stop it. I hit the brakes, but it was too late. The cruiser rolled over the strip with 4 distinct pops, all 4 tires gone in 2 seconds. The vehicle lurched, dropped, and came to a grinding stop on the rims. The friendly smile never left the man's face. Evening, he called out, his voice carrying that cheerful authority of someone used to being obeyed. Sorry about the tires. Cannot be too careful these days. Why don't you step out of the vehicle? Nice and slow. Let's have a chat about how this is going to work. 3 more men emerged from the tree line, all armed hunting rifles, shotguns, serious hardware. They moved with the coordination of people who had done this before. My hand went to the tire iron, but one of the men, a younger guy with a mullet that would have been ironic in the before times, racked a shotgun. The sound was unmistakable. Let's not, Mullet said. Keys on the hood, hands where we can see him. You know the drill. I looked at Shadow. She was pressed low against the dashboard, every muscle coiled, not running, waiting. Smart cat, reflective vest said, noticing my glance. Too bad about the tires, really. That is a nice rig you got there. All those modifications must have taken some serious know-how. The armor plating, the reinforcements. Hell, you basically built yourself a zombie-proof tank. He walked closer, his smile widening. Here's the thing. We need that tank, and everything in it. So here is how this is going to work. You are going to unload everything, and I mean everything, into a nice pile right here. Food, water, fuel, tools, weapons. Then we are going to take your fancy truck, and you are going to walk away with your life. And if I don't, I tried to sound tough, came out more exhausted than anything. Then you don't walk away. This came from the 4th man, who had been silent until now. He stepped into better view, and I felt something cold settle in my gut. Older than the others. Maybe 45, with the kind of face that had seen violence and not looked away. He carried a pistol on his hip, casual and comfortable, the way people carry phones, military bearing even in flannel and jeans. My name's Silas, he said. Used to be sergeant back when that meant something. Now I am just a guy trying to survive. And that vehicle, that is my ticket. So you can make this easy, or you can make this painful. Either way, I am driving out of here in your cruiser. I got out slowly. Shadow streaked past me before I could stop her, disappearing into the tree line in a flash of orange fur. Smart cat. Silas repeated. Then to his men, search him. Check the vehicle. Everything goes in the pile. They were efficient. I will give them that. 20 minutes, and I was standing there with nothing but the clothes on my back, and a single water bottle that Silas tossed to me with mock generosity. For the road, he said, it is about 15 miles back to the last town. Well, what is left of it? You seem like a capable guy. You will probably make it. They were loading my supplies into my cruiser, my modifications, my preparations, everything I had built over the past week. Mullet was laughing at something, holding up the compound bow like it was a trophy. Another one of them found my stash of freeze-dried meals and whistled appreciatively. Man, Mullet called out to Silas. This guy was set. Look at all this shit. He has got enough here for months. Had enough. One of the others corrected, and they all laughed. Silas stayed close to me, that pistol never far from his hand. No hard feelings. Yeah, it is just business, survival economics. You built something good, and now someone stronger is taking it. That is how the world works now. How it has always worked. Really, we just don't pretend anymore. He gestured down the road with his gun. Start walking. And brother, don't look back. Don't try to follow. Don't do anything stupid. Because the thing about survival economics, the strong don't just take from the weak. Sometimes they eliminate the competition. I started walking. Behind me, I heard the cruiser's engine start up my engine, my vehicle, and the sound of celebration as Silas's group loaded up. The sound got quieter as I walked, then disappeared entirely as I rounded a bend in the road. I made it maybe half a mile before I had to stop. Not from exhaustion, from pure, crystallized rage. Everything. They had taken everything. The vehicle I had spent years building, the supplies I had scavenged, the tools, the weapons, the food. Even the survivor's notebook, probably sitting in a glove box they had never think to check. I had survived the outbreak, the infected, the end of civilization itself, and humans regular, living, breathing. Humans had taken me down in 20 minutes. I sat on a rock at the side of the road, that single water bottle at my feet, staring at the forest around me, 80 miles from the cabin. No vehicle, no supplies, no weapons except my hands and whatever I could find. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in colors that reminded me of that first day leaving Portland, when I had thought the biggest threat was the infected, when I had been naive enough to think preparation mattered. That is when I heard it. A familiar meow, cautious and questioning, from the tree line. Shadow emerged, picking her way carefully down the embankment toward me. She was dirty, a few burrs stuck in her fur, but unharmed. She walked right up to me, head butted my knee, then sat down and started cleaning her paws. They took everything, I told her. She paused mid-lick, looked at me with those green eyes, then went back to grooming. Everything, I repeated. We are screwed. Completely screwed. Shadow finished cleaning her paw, stood up, stretched, and started walking down the road. After about 10 feet, she stopped and looked back at me, meowed once, then kept walking. I followed. What else was I going to do? As the sun disappeared behind the mountains and darkness crept in, I realized something. Silas was right about one thing. The world had changed, and the strong took from the weak. But he had made one critical mistake. He had assumed I would stay weak. Shadow led me off the road about an hour after the sun set. Not far, just into the tree line, to a small clearing sheltered by an overhang of rock. It was the kind of spot you had need local knowledge to find. Or, apparently, feline instinct. I sat with my back against stone, Shadow curled in my lap, and tried to inventory what I actually had left. The clothes on my back, one bottle of water, a lighter in my jacket pocket that I had forgotten about, a pocket knife that Mullet had somehow missed. Not exactly a survival kit. We are 48 hours from dying of exposure, I told Shadow. She purred. Maybe 72 if we find water. After that, starvation, assuming the infected don't find us first. Shadow's purring intensified. Somehow, The sound was comforting. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, the moon had risen, and Shadow was gone. Panic hit me immediately, alone in the dark. No vehicle, no weapons, no idea where a meow from the trees. Shadow emerged, carrying something in her mouth. She dropped it at my feet. A mouse, dead, but fresh. "Thanks," I said, not sure whether to laugh or cry. "I will save that for later." She disappeared again. I was starting to stand up when she came back. Another mouse. It took me a minute to understand what she was doing. Shadow was hunting, bringing me food. Like she was taking care of me instead of the other way around. The absurdity of it being mothered by a cat while armed men drove around in my stolen vehicle almost broke me. Almost. Instead, I started laughing. Quiet at first, then harder until I had to muffle it with my jacket to avoid attracting attention. When I finally got control of myself, Shadow was sitting there giving me a look that clearly said, "Fair you done? Asterisk, yeah." I said, "I am done. Thanks for the intervention." I couldn't sleep after that. My mind kept circling back to Silas and his crew, the way they had worked together. The casual violence in their efficiency, the fact that they were probably 2 miles away, camped in my vehicle, celebrating with my supplies. Shadow left again. This time, she was gone longer. I was starting to worry when she came trotting back. But instead of bringing food, she was acting strange, pacing, meowing, running a few feet toward the trees, then back to me, then toward the trees again. "What? What is it, girl?" She ran toward the trees, stopped, looked back. The universal sign for Faye follow me, Faye. I followed. We moved through the forest for maybe 20 minutes. Shadow navigating with the confidence of something that could see in the dark. I stumbled after her, using moonlight and sheer luck to avoid breaking an ankle. Then I smelled it. Campfire smoke. Shadow led me to an outcropping of rocks that overlooked a small ravine below. I could see flickering firelight and hear voices. Laughter, the clink of bottles. Silas's camp. They had pulled the cruiser into a clearing next to the ravine, created a perimeter with their weapons laid out in easy reach, and were in the process of getting drunk on what looked like whiskey they had looted from somewhere. My supplies were scattered around my food, my tools, my gear. They had even found the bow and were taking turns trying to shoot arrows at a tree, missing badly and finding it hilarious. 5 men total, all armed, but drunk and getting drunker. Celebration after a successful robbery. I watched them from the shadows. Shadow pressed against my leg, and felt that rage from earlier crystallize into something colder, more focused. I couldn't fight 5 armed men, not directly, but maybe I didn't have to. Shadow nudged my hand with her head, then started moving along the ravine's edge. I followed, curious. She led me around to the far side, where the ravine deepened, and the sides became steeper. And there, at the bottom, I saw them. Infected. Maybe 15, maybe 20, all clustered together in the narrow space, like they had fallen in and couldn't figure out how to get out. They were agitated, moving in circles, clambering over each other, trapped but very much active. Shadow sat down and looked at me, then at the infected, then back at me. "No," I said. That is insane. That is murder." Shadow meowed. Not aggressive, not demanding, just informative. Like she was saying, Faye just pointing out the options. Asterisk, I looked back toward Silas's camp. Could hear Mullet telling some story, everyone laughing. Could see my cruiser parked there, my gear scattered around like spoils of war. Could remember Silas's words, "Faithy strong take from the weak." That is how it works now. Asterisk, They would do it to me, I whispered. They basically did do it to me, left me to die. Shadow blinked slowly. I spent the next hour setting up what was probably the stupidest plan in the history of apocalyptic survival. There was an old pickup truck about 50 yards from Silas's camp, abandoned and forgotten. I managed to pop the hood quietly, mechanic skills for the win, and rigged the horn to the battery. Not permanently, just a loose connection that could be triggered by tapping 2 wires together. Timer was trickier. No electronics to work with. But I had bootlaces, a rock, and about 20 minutes to get creative. In the end, I built something that would have made my engineering professors weep, but it would work, probably. Maybe. A lace tied to the rock, tied to a branch bent back and held in place by another lace that I would partially cut through. When it gave way, the branch would snap forward, knock the rock into the exposed wires, complete the circuit, and trigger the horn. The burning question: how long until the lace frayed through? I gave it 15 minutes. Could be 10, could be 20, could be never, and I would look like an idiot. I set it up, said a quick prayer to any god that might still be listening, and got the hell out of there with Shadow. We made it back to our overlook position just as the horn started blaring loud, insistent, echoing off the ravine walls. The effect on both camps was immediate. Silas's men scrambled, grabbing weapons, shouting over each other. What the hell, where is that coming from? Get the lights, could be infected in the ravine. The infected went absolutely berserk. The sound had them all moving, climbing, scrambling up the steep walls with an energy I hadn't seen before. Some fell back down. Others found purchase on roots and rocks. They were getting out. Move. Silas was shouting. Everyone in the vehicle, now, now. But they were drunk, disorganized, and the infected were already spilling over the ravine's edge. The first one that made it into the clearing was one of the faster ones. Maybe it had been a runner in life. Or maybe hunger gave it speed. It hit Mullet before he made it 3 steps, taking him down hard. What happened next was chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. Gunshots, screaming. Men running in different directions. The infected kept coming, drawn by the noise and the movement and the blood. Silas was trying to rally his men, get them to the cruiser. But it was too late. They had been unprepared, drunk, overconfident. The same mistakes I had been making a week ago. I watched from the rocks as the camp fell apart, watched as infected overran the position. Watched as Silas's men fought, ran, died. Shadow sat next to me, perfectly calm, like this was just another day. When a gap appeared, when most of the infected were busy with the camp, and the men were scattered, I moved. Down the slope, quiet and quick, straight to the cruiser. The keys were in the ignition, Silas's arrogance, assuming no one would dare steal from him. I fired up the engine. The sound drew attention, immediately infected turning toward the vehicle. And somewhere in the chaos I heard Silas shouting, but by then I was moving. Tires crunching over rough ground, infected stumbling out of the way or going under the wheels. Shadow jumped through the window I had left cracked, landing in the passenger seat with perfect grace. Behind us, the camp dissolved into screaming and gunfire. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Either Silas and his crew would survive, or they wouldn't. Either way, they had learned the same lesson I had. In this new world, being strong wasn't enough. You had to be ruthless. I drove through the night, putting miles between me and the ravine. My cruiser, my supplies. Shadow sitting in the passenger seat, looking thoroughly pleased with herself. As the adrenaline faded and my hands started shaking on the wheel, I realized what I had done. I had led infected to human beings. I had watched people die. I had retrieved my stuff while they fought for their lives. I had crossed a line I didn't know existed. We are not good people anymore, I told Shadow. She meowed once, curled up, and went to sleep. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. 60 miles to the cabin. Enough fuel, enough food, enough guilt to last a lifetime. I kept driving. The mountain road wasn't just a road anymore. It was an endurance test. 3 days after retrieving the cruiser, I was starting to understand why most people evacuated towards cities instead of into the wilderness. The wilderness doesn't care if you survive. It just exists, indifferent and hungry. The first warning sign came when the temperature gauge started climbing. Not dangerous yet, but trending wrong. I pulled over at a scenic overlook to investigate. Shadow hopped out immediately, found a sunny spot on a rock, and began the important work of pretending I didn't exist. Under the hood, the problem was obvious. The radiator had taken damage, probably from the spike strip incident. Maybe from driving over rough terrain, possibly from using the cruiser as a battering ram against infected. The engineering part of my brain cataloged the issue. Small crack, slow leak, manageable with repairs. The survival part of my brain added, if you had replacement parts, proper tools, and time you don't have. I patched it with epoxy from my emergency kit, the same kit I had restocked from Silas's camp along with everything else. It wouldn't hold forever. Maybe 2 days. Maybe 2 hours. The mountains didn't care. Back on the road, the cruiser's performance was noticeably worse. The engine ran hot even with the patch. The suspension, already stressed from overloading and rough terrain, was making sounds suspensions aren't supposed to make. Every bump sent vibrations through the frame that felt personal, like the vehicle was telling me it was hurting. Just get us to the cabin, I muttered, patting the dashboard. 40 miles. You can do 40 miles. The dashboard didn't respond, but the temperature gauge climbed another few degrees. Shadow, meanwhile, had developed a new trick. About 5 minutes before something bad was about to happen, she would tense up. It started as subtle ears twitching, tail still, but the pattern was consistent enough that I had learned to pay attention. When she suddenly went rigid on the dashboard, I slowed down. Good thing too, because around the next bend, a massive pine tree had fallen across the road. No infected, no ambush. Just nature doing its thing, completely indifferent to my survival. The detour added 7 miles and an hour of careful navigation through old logging trails. The cruiser hated every minute of it. So did I. Shadow seemed fine with the whole situation. Even caught and ate a bird during one of my repair stops. Must be nice, I told her, having your food delivery service still operational. She burped. I chose to interpret that as agreement. By day 4, the fuel situation was critical. I had used more than planned on detours and fighting terrain. The gauge showed less than a quarter tank, maybe enough to reach the cabin. Maybe not. The mountain roads were unpredictable, and I was learning that my GPS estimates had been based on ideal conditions that no longer existed. That is when the weather turned. The first snowflake hit my windshield around noon. Within an hour, it was a legitimate snowfall. By evening, the road ahead was white, and visibility was dropping fast. The cruiser's tires, already worn from the spike strip replacement I had done with salvaged rubber, struggled for traction on the increasing gradient. I pulled over as dark fell, the snow piling up fast. Shadow had long since curled up on the passenger seat, her fur fluffed against the cold. The heater worked, but running it meant burning fuel. Not running it meant freezing. I compromised heater for 30 minutes, then off for 30, then back on. Shadow and I huddled together during the off cycles. Turns out, cats make excellent space heaters. The cabin was maybe 25 miles away now, but those 25 miles might as well have been 200 if the snow kept up. I tried the radio more out of habit than hope. Nothing but static on every channel. The emergency broadcasts had stopped days ago. Either the stations had fallen, or everyone was dead, or both. The silence was somehow worse than the panic had been. Around midnight, Shadow woke me up with a hiss. Not her infected warning, something else. I looked out the window and saw it. A mountain lion. Maybe 30 feet away, watching the cruiser with the calculating patience of an apex predator. We locked eyes through the mesh-reinforced glass. The lion's gaze was totally different from the infected intelligent aware, making decisions. It watched us for what felt like an hour but was probably 5 minutes. Then, dismissing us as not worth the effort, it disappeared into the snow. Great, I said to Shadow, added to the list of things trying to kill us. Hypothermia, starvation, infected, and now mountain lions. Anything else want a shot? Shadow meowed. Through the snow, I could see shapes moving on the road ahead. Infected, maybe 3 or 4, shambling through the weather like it didn't exist. Because for them, it didn't. They didn't feel cold, didn't need shelter, just kept moving, kept hunting. The snow kept falling. I made a decision. Start the engine, risk the fuel, try to push through while I still could. The alternative was waiting here until either the weather cleared or we ran out of fuel trying to stay warm. The cruiser started on the 3rd try, not a good sign, but the engine caught and held. I pulled back onto the road, wipers working overtime against the snow, headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the white darkness. The infected on the road didn't react until I was almost on top of them. Then they turned, those dead eyes somehow tracking the movement through the blizzard, and started their shambling run. I didn't slow down. The cruiser hit the first one, sent it spinning into the snowbank, hit the second, the third got knocked aside by the bull bar. Then the engine died. Just stopped. No warning, no coughing, no dramatic death rattle. 1 second the cruiser was moving. The next it was coasting, and then it was still. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. Shadow was on her feet, alert, staring at the rearview mirror. I looked. The infected I would hit were getting up. Number no. I popped the hood, grabbed a flashlight, jumped out into the snow. It was coming down so hard I could barely see 3 feet. The cold hit like a physical blow. Under the hood, the problem was immediately obvious. The radiator patch had failed. Coolant everywhere. Engine overheated. Probably warped the cylinder head. The cruiser was dead. Behind me, Shadow hissed from inside the vehicle. I looked up. The infected were closer now. Maybe 20 feet. Moving through the snow with that relentless, inevitable pace. I slammed the hood, dove back into the vehicle, locked the doors, scanned my options. We were stuck on a logging road, in a blizzard, with a dead engine, infected outside, and no way to call for help, because help didn't exist anymore. The cabin was still 25 miles away. I might as well have been on the moon. Shadow climbed into my lap, pressing close. Through the window, I could see the infected surrounding the cruiser, pawing at the mesh, leaving bloody handprints on the glass. The snow kept falling. I pulled Shadow closer, felt her heartbeat against my chest, and tried to figure out if there was any possible way we were getting out of this alive. Dawn came eventually, the way it always does, indifferent to whether you survived the night or became something's meal. The snow had stopped, leaving everything buried under about 8 inches of white silence. The infected had wandered off somewhere around 3 a.m., drawn away by God knows what. Maybe they had frozen. Maybe they had just lost interest. I didn't particularly care. I was too busy trying not to freeze myself. The cruiser was cold enough that I could see my breath inside. Shadow and I had spent the night huddled under every piece of clothing I could layer, sharing body heat, occasionally breathing on our hands for warmth. Now, with daylight, I could assess the damage. The engine was toast. Even if I could fix the radiator, the overheating had done internal damage. I had parts I didn't have, tools I had left behind. and about a week in a heated garage. None of those things existed anymore. But the vehicle still had value, just not as transportation. Over the next 2 days, I turned the cruiser into a salvage yard. The seats came out fabric could be used for insulation, for bandages, for a dozen things. The carpet became ground cover for camping. The roof rack became a makeshift sled for hauling supplies. I drained every fluid I could capture. Fuel into jerry cans, oil into bottles, even windshield washer fluid, because who knew what I'd need in the future. The tools were the real treasure. The socket set, the jack, the spare tire iron, the jumper cables, all of it went into a pack I built from the cruiser's cargo liner. I was methodical about it. Engineering brain taking over. Weight distribution, essential versus useful versus luxury. Shadow supervised from a sunny patch on the hood, occasionally catching and eating small creatures, stupid enough to think the apocalypse meant they were safe. I found myself envious of her efficiency. No moral crisis about eating, no guilt about survival. Just hunt, eat, sleep, repeat. Must be nice, I told her during one of our breaks, being apex predator of the mouse kingdom. She looked at me, yawned deliberately, and went back to grooming. The radio silent for days now. I kept useless weight, logically, but something about the idea of being completely cut off from other human voices felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross. Every few hours I had turned it on, scanned through the stations, hoping static, more static, nothing but static. On the afternoon of the second day, I caught myself doing math on the back of an old receipt. Food supplies, maybe 4 days if I rationed hard. Water, 3 days, maybe 4 if the snow continued, and I could melt it. Distance to cabin, 25 miles through mountain terrain, in winter, on foot, while carrying 50 pounds of gear. The math didn't work out well. There was a town marked on my map, about 15 miles back the way I would come. Small mountain community, probably population 500 before the outbreak. It would have supplies. It would also definitely have infected. I sat there in the gutted cruiser, shadow purring in my lap, and weighed my options. Continue forward with inadequate supplies, and probably die of exposure in a week. Or go back, risk the town, and maybe find enough to make the rest of the journey. What do you think? I asked Shadow. She bit my thumb, not hard. Just a reminder that she wasn't a magic 8-ball. I decided on the town. The journey back was harder than expected. The snow had melted in places, refrozen in others, creating a treacherous mix of mud and ice. The improvised sled kept catching on roots and rocks. My pack, carefully weight distributed in the cruiser, felt like it gained 10 pounds every hour. Shadow, naturally, bounded ahead with ease, occasionally looking back like she couldn't believe how slow I was. It took me most of a day to cover the 15 miles. By the time I reached the outskirts of the town, a faded sign proclaimed it Ridgemont. Pop 487. The sun was setting, and my legs were screaming. Smoke rose from multiple buildings. Not fresh fires, old ones. Burned out days or weeks ago. The main street was a disaster. Cars piled up in what looked like a panicked evacuation attempt. Windows smashed in every building I could see. That unmistakable smell of decomposition riding on the cold air. Shadow's fur puffed up. Her tail went rigid. Bad signs. I pulled out the compound bow I had taken from Silas's camp. 4 arrows left. I had practiced during the 2 days cannibalizing the cruiser, but practiced was being generous. I could probably hit a barn from inside the barn. The hardware store was my target right there on Main Street. Front windows shattered, interior dark. Shadow scouted ahead, disappeared through the broken glass. Came back a minute later with an all-clear meow. Inside was a mess, but not completely picked over. Someone had looted the obvious stuff generators, propane tanks, anything that screamed survival gear. But the back sections, the boring everyday repair stuff, were largely untouched. I found treasure, radiator sealant, zip ties, duct tape, WD-40, rope, a hand crank flashlight, batteries, even a solar charger for USB devices. I loaded up methodically, Shadow watching from a shelf like a disapproving store manager. The grocery was next door. Worse shape, completely ransacked. Shelves toppled, food scattered and rotting, but I knew from experience that people missed things. I crawled into the back storage area, found cans that had rolled under shelving, freeze-dried camping meals mixed in with regular groceries, even a case of bottled water someone had overlooked. I was loading it into my pack when Shadow started growling. Not her warning growl, her Fey run now Fey growl. I looked up just as the first infected shambled around the corner of the aisle. Then another. Then another. They were coming from the back of the store, drawn by the noise I had been making, and there were more than I could count in the dimming light. I grabbed my pack, grabbed Shadow and ran for the front. More infected were spilling onto Main Street. Dozens of them, like they had been waiting in the buildings, and my presence had triggered some kind of dinner bell. The auto parts store was across the street. I could see it through the growing crowd of infected tools, supplies, maybe even something I could use to repair a vehicle if I found one. But between me and it was a wall of the dead. Shadow hissed in my arms. The infected were closing in, cutting off my retreat. I had the bow, but 4 arrows against dozens was suicide math. I backed into the grocery, looking for another exit. The infected followed, that relentless shambling pace. No hurry, because they knew something I was learning. There was nowhere to run. That is when the first gunshot cracked through the air, and the infected closest to me dropped with a hole in its skull. I spun around, looking for the shooter. Another shot. Another infected down. A voice, female, shouted from somewhere above. The vehicle. The blue pickup. Get to it now. I didn't question, didn't analyze, just ran toward where she had indicated. Shadow tucked against my chest. Infected grasping at us from both sides. The pickup was there, old Ford, probably from the 90s, and the engine was running. The door hung open. I dove in. Shadow spilled across my lap, and I was slamming the door shut just as infected hands hit the windows. More gunshots from above a window on the second floor of what looked like a hotel, each one precise. Each one dropping an infected that was getting too close to the truck. The voice again. Drive north. I will meet you at the junction. I didn't need to be told twice. The truck lurched forward, standard transmission. Hadn't driven one in years, and I stalled it immediately. Infected were surrounding us, pounding on the hood, the windows. Come on, I muttered, turning the key again. The engine caught. I remembered how clutches worked, and the truck jerked forward, scattering infected like bowling pins. Behind us, more gunshots, methodical, professional. Whoever was up there knew exactly what they were doing. I drove, hands shaking on the wheel, Shadow finally settling on the passenger's seat, and giving me a look that clearly said Fadat was too close. Asterisk, the junction was a mile north, another intersection, another abandoned checkpoint. I pulled the truck to the side, engine running, trying to get my heart rate under control. 5 minutes, 10, 15. I was starting to think the voice had been my imagination, some stress-induced hallucination, when a figure appeared jogging down the road with a rifle slung over her shoulder and a pack that looked heavier than mine. She was maybe late 20s, athletic build, tactical gear that had seen serious use. Dark hair pulled back, face smudged with dirt or blood or both. She ran with the efficiency of someone used to carrying weight over distance. As she got closer, I could see the blood, a lot of it soaking through her jacket on the left side. She reached the truck, looked at me through the passenger window, and her hand went to the pistol on her hip. Shadow hissed at her. "Drive," the woman said, her voice tight with pain. "Now north." "You are bleeding," I said. "Drive." She yanked open the passenger door, shoved Shadow onto the dashboard with surprisingly gentle force, and climbed in. The interior light showed the extent of the wound, a gash along her ribs, deep and actively bleeding. "You need," she pointed the pistol at me. Not threatening, exactly. More like explaining a fact. "You can drive and I might live. Or we can sit here discussing my medical needs until those things catch up, and we both die, your choice." I put the truck in gear and drove. In the passenger seat, the woman leaned back. Her breathing shallow and quick. Shadow had relocated to the dashboard, was staring at her with those unreadable green eyes. "Good cat," the woman muttered, then passed out. I drove through the night, this bleeding stranger in my stolen truck, my cat judging us both from the dashboard, and no idea if I had just been saved or if I had made a terrible mistake. The cabin was still 25 miles away, but somehow it felt further than ever. I found an abandoned cabin about 3 miles north of the junction. Not the cabin. My cabin was still 20-something miles away, but it would do for an emergency triage situation. The woman, I still didn't know her name, was in bad shape. The blood had soaked through her jacket, through her shirt, and was now pooling on the truck's bench seat. Shadow had moved to the dashboard early on, wanting nothing to do with the mess. I half-carried, half-dragged her inside. The cabin was small, probably a weekend hunting spot, with a wood stove, a cot, and not much else. No infected, no bodies, no signs of violence. Someone had locked it up and left, probably hoping to return. They wouldn't be returning. I got the woman onto the cot and started removing her tactical vest. She was semi-conscious, muttering something that might have been protests or might have been instructions. "Hard to tell." "I need to see the wound," I said. "I know first aid. I can help." She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't." Her eyes focused on me briefly. "Don't you fucking dare." Then she passed out completely. I had taken exactly one wilderness first aid course 5 years ago, mostly because the ex insisted we needed to be prepared for outdoor emergencies. At the time, I had thought it was overkill. Now, I was pathetically grateful for those 8 hours in a community college classroom. The wound was bad but survivable. Deep laceration along the ribs, probably from a knife or broken glass. Not a bite. Thank God, not a bite. I could work with this. I used water from my pack to clean it, duct tape and gauze from the auto parts hall to bandage it. Not sterile, not professional. But in this new world, good enough to not die was the gold standard of medical care. She woke up while I was taping the final bandage. Woke up fast, eyes snapping open, hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. I would put her pistol on the far side of the room, seemed prudent. She took in her situation, shirtless except for bandages and a sports bra. Me leaning over her with first aid supplies, tactical vest on the floor, weapons out of reach. Then she punched me, hard, right in the jaw. Stars exploded across my vision. What the eye fell backward, tasting blood. She was scrambling off the cot, grabbing for the vest, moving like someone ready to fight through the pain. "You son of a bitch, you medical treatment," I shouted. "Hands up, I was treating your wound. You were bleeding out." She stopped, actually looked at the bandages for the first time, then at the first aid supplies scattered around. Her face went from rage to confusion to embarrassment in about 3 seconds. Oh, she touched the bandages carefully. Oh shit, I thought. Yeah, I got what you thought. I worked my jaw, pretty sure nothing was broken. For the record, I am gay, and even if I wasn't, maybe don't assume the guy who just saved your life is also trying to assault you. You are gay. Is that really the part you are focusing on? She sat back down on the cot, wincing. Sorry. The last time I woke up wounded with someone over me. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Shadow chose that moment to jump onto the cot, circle twice, and curl up against the woman's side. "Your cat likes me," she said, surprised. Shadow's a good judge of character usually. She smiled just a flicker, but it was there. Then she looked at me seriously. "Thank you for the medical treatment, for not leaving me, for," she gestured vaguely at the cabin, "the supplies. The fact that we were both still breathing. All of it. You saved me first. Those infected in town would have. We are even then." She held out her hand. Astrid, former Army logistics specialist, currently unemployed survivalist. I shook her hand. Ryder, former automotive engineer, current refugee, that your truck stolen. The cruiser was mine until some assholes with a spike strip disagreed. Marauders. She said it like a curse word. They are everywhere now. The ones who adapted fast, realized other people's supplies are easier to take than find. Something in her voice made me ask, "You run into them?" Her face went dark. Run into them. I was with them, sort of. Military remnant group. About 10 of us, all logistics or support corps. Figured we would pool resources, watch each other's backs. My team leader guy named Silas. My blood went cold. Silas. She looked at me sharply. "You know him? He and his crew robbed me. Took my vehicle, my supplies, left me with nothing." Astrid laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, that tracks. Silas had this whole philosophy about survival economics, said the old rules didn't apply. That strength was the only currency that mattered. Started making decisions I couldn't support." "What kind of decisions?" "The kind where you leave wounded team members behind to save ammo. The kind where you take supplies from civilians at gunpoint. The kind where," she touched her bandaged ribs, "where you kill anyone who might tell others what you have done." The cabin felt colder. "They tried to kill you, they succeeded with the others. My whole team, people I had served with, trusted with my life. Silas decided we would be easier to manage with fewer witnesses. Set up an ambush, shot everyone. I only survived by playing dead." Her voice was flat, emotionless. The kind of voice that came from trauma too fresh to process. Woke up in a pile of my friends' bodies, managed to crawl away while Silas and his crew looted everyone's gear. Jesus Christ. Yeah. She looked down at Shadow, who was purring against her side. "I have been running for 3 days, raiding towns for supplies, trying to get distance, heading anywhere that wasn't where they were. Then I saw you in Ridgemont, heard the infected, figured, I don't know, maybe help someone else not die. I didn't know what to say to that. What do you say to someone who watched their entire world betray and murder them?" "There is a cabin," I offered finally. "About 20 miles north, isolated, well-stocked, belonged to a friend before all this. I was headed there when everything went sideways. You are welcome to join. Once you heal up, I work alone now." The words came out automatic, rehearsed. So did I. "Then I got a cat." I gestured at Shadow, didn't plan on it. But here we are. Survival's easier with someone watching your back. Everyone watching my back is dead. Not everyone. I pointed at myself. I am still here, and I just spent 3 hours keeping you from bleeding out. So I am moderately invested in your continued survival. She almost smiled. Moderately invested? I put duct tape on your ribs. That is practically a marriage proposal in apocalypse terms. That got a real laugh. Short, surprised, but real. Shadow meowed, annoyed at the disturbance. "I will think about it," Astrid said. "The cabin thing, but I make my own calls. I am not joining anyone's group, not following anyone's orders. Fair. I am not great at taking orders anyway. Ask my ex-wife, or my former boss, or that one traffic cop who I get it. You are a rebel. I prefer independently minded professional. That is just rebel, with extra words. We settled into an easier silence. Astrid lay back on the cot, clearly exhausted. Shadow repositioned herself, now spread across both our laps like a furry bridge. We should rest here tonight, I said. Head north in the morning. Your wound needs time to set before we start moving. Fine. You rest. I will keep watch better. She studied me for a long moment. Why would you really save me? I thought about it. The honest answer. Because I spent the last week learning to be ruthless, learning that helping people gets you killed. And I really didn't want to become the kind of person who drives past someone bleeding out. That is not very pragmatic. Yeah. Well, I also kept a cat and named it Shadow. Pragmatism and I have a complicated relationship. Shadow meowed, apparently agreeing. Astrid closed her eyes, but she was smiling. 20 miles to this cabin, give or take. And you have got supplies? Real supplies? Enough to get there. After that, I shrugged. We figure it out. If you want, no pressure. She was quiet for so long I thought she had fallen asleep. Then Ryder. Yeah. Thanks for the duct tape marriage proposal. I laughed. Shadow purred. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow and smoke and the end of the world. But inside the cabin, for the first time in weeks, things felt almost okay. We spent 2 days in that cabin while Astrid healed. Well, healed is generous, more like reached the point where she could move without screaming. The duct tape and gauze job I had done was holding, but proper medical care would have been ideal. Proper medical care would have also required a functioning hospital, living doctors, and a world that hadn't ended. We worked with what we had. The first day was mostly awkward. Astrid slept, woke up defensive and suspicious, realized she was safe, fell back asleep. I maintained the wood stove, inventoried our combined supplies, which were better together than separate, and tried to figure out how to hot wire the stolen truck for long-term use. Shadow divided her time between us equally, which I chose to interpret as her giving Astrid the official seal of approval. The second day, Astrid was strong enough to move around. She sat by the stove while I rewrapped her bandages, both of us pretending the situation wasn't weird. You are better at this than you let on, she said, watching me work. YouTube videos and a first aid course, the modern apocalypse survivor's resume. Where would you learn the duct tape technique? That is not standard. Backpacking trip 3 years ago. Friend fell, gashed his leg open. We were 10 miles from the trailhead. Rangers showed us how to stabilize it with tape and gauze until we got him to a hospital. I tied off the final bandage. Figured it was good enough for a mountain in Colorado. Good enough for the end of the world. Your friend make it? Got 12 stitches and a story he tells at every party. Well, used to tell. Before, I didn't finish the sentence. Before was a minefield we both avoided. Astrid stretched carefully, testing the bandage's solid work. I will live to be betrayed another day. The joke landed wrong. Too close to real trauma. We both felt it. Sorry, she said. Dark humor's kind of my thing. Mine too. The ex-wife hated it. Said I used humor to avoid processing emotions. Sounds like you married a therapist marine biologist. But she read a lot of self-help books. I started packing up the medical supplies. You military people, all this gallows humor. Or is it just you? Logistics Corps. Remember, we are the weird ones. Combat guys get PTSD. We get spreadsheet anxiety and an unhealthy relationship with inventory management. She paused. We had those things. The grief was right there, under the surface, fresh and raw. I changed the subject. Tell me about your team. The one before Silas went psycho. She hesitated, then started talking. Maybe she needed to. Maybe it helped to remember them as people instead of bodies. There was Martinez, the communications specialist, who could fix any radio with spit and prayer. Chen, the medic who had kept them all alive through basic training. Rodriguez and Washington, the supply sergeants who could source anything from anywhere. The rest, names she listed with the careful reverence of someone building a memorial from words. And Silas? I asked. Her face hardened. Silas was different, even before. Always had this edge, this belief that he was smarter than everyone else. When things fell apart, he adapted fast. Too fast, like he had been waiting for civilization to collapse so he could stop pretending to care about rules. How would it start, the betrayal? Slowly. First it was just tactical decisions. Leave behind the non-essential gear. Then it was leave behind the non-essential people. Anyone wounded became a resource drain. Anyone who questioned him became a liability. She stared at the fire. By the end, I was the only one still pushing back. Guess that is why I got the honor of being left for dead. He is still out there. Unless those infected in the ravine got him. A dark smile. But men like Silas, they survive. It is what they are good at. We sat in silence. Shadow jumped into Astrid's lap, and she absently started petting her. The cat purred like a diesel engine. She really does like you, I said. Cats know survivors when they see them. Is that what we are? Survivors. What else would we be? I thought about it. I don't know, refugees. Lucky, temporarily not dead, temporarily not dead. I like that. She scratched Shadow behind the ears. Realistic without being hopeless. My specialty. That evening, I made dinner from our combined supplies, freeze-dried camping food mixed with canned goods, heated over the wood stove. It was terrible. We ate it anyway. So, this cabin, Astrid said, scraping the last of the questionable stew from her bowl. What is the plan when we get there? Honestly, I hadn't thought past get there and hope for the best. It is isolated, has a well, solar panels for power. Friend of mine used it for weekend retreats. Figured it was better than staying in the city. Defensible. Never thought about it in those terms. It has got a good sight line. Thick woods on all sides. Only one access road. So yes to concealment, possibly yes to defense. She nodded. What about supplies long term? There is a storage shed. My friend kept emergency supplies, mysteries, water, medical gear. Probably enough for a few months if we are careful. If your friend made it, they took those supplies with them. I hadn't thought of that. Well, shit. Or if your friend didn't make it, the cabin might be compromised. Infected scavengers could be anything. You are just full of optimism. I am full of reality. Big difference. She set down her bowl, but I will come with you. Check it out at least. If it is secure and stocked, we figure out next steps. If it is not, we figure out next steps. That is very conditional support. I am a very conditional person these days. Shadow chose that moment to jump onto the table between us and meow loudly. When we both looked at her, she very deliberately knocked my spoon onto the floor. I think she is telling us to stop being dramatic, I said. Smart cat. We spent that night actually sleeping instead of keeping watch me on the floor with my pack as a pillow. Astrid on the cot, Shadow alternating between us like she was checking our vitals. When I woke up, Astrid was already up, testing her mobility with the cautious movements of someone who knew their body was held together with duct tape and stubbornness. How is the wound? I asked. Hurts like hell. I will live. She pulled on her jacket carefully. We should get moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more risk we attract, infected or human. Both. We packed up the cabin, loaded the truck, and headed north. The stolen Ford ran rough but reliable. The roads were clearer here, less traffic, fewer abandoned vehicles. The infected presence seemed lower too, though that might have been wishful thinking. Astrid rode with her pistol in her lap, eyes scanning every shadow. Shadow sat between us, calm and alert. "You ever think about what happens after?" I asked, breaking the silence. "After what?" "After we reach the cabin. After we, I don't know, establish some kind of sustainable existence. What comes next? We die eventually." She said it matter-of-factly. Infection, starvation, infected, other humans, weather, age. Something gets us. You are a real ray of sunshine. I am a realist. There is a difference between realism and fatalism. She looked at me. Is there? Really? Look around, Ryder. The world ended. We are driving through the corpse of civilization in a stolen truck, heading to a cabin that might not exist anymore, eating expired food and drinking melted snow. What part of this screams hopeful future to you? I thought about it. The part where we are still trying, the part where you saved me in that town, the part where I saved you instead of driving past. We could have given up, could have just stopped. But we didn't. That is just survival instinct. Maybe. Or maybe it is something more. Maybe we are building something new, something better than what Silas represented. Or maybe we are delaying the inevitable. Shadow meowed, annoyed at the grim conversation. See, I said. Shadow agrees with me. Shadow's a cat. She doesn't have existential dread. Must be nice. We drove in silence for a while. The mountains rose around us, beautiful and indifferent. Snow capped the highest peaks. The sun painted everything gold, Ryder. Astrid said quietly. Yeah, thanks. For this, whatever this is. Partnership of the temporarily not dead. Yeah. That the cabin was 15 miles ahead. We would reach it by nightfall if the truck held up. After that, we would figure it out together. The truck died exactly 4 miles from the cabin. Not dramatically, no explosion. No grinding metal death rattle. Just a polite cough, a shudder, and then nothing. Like it had done its job and decided it earned retirement. You have got to be kidding me, I said, turning the key. Nothing. Come on. 4 miles. You couldn't give me 4 more miles. Astrid was already out, hood up, examining the engine with the efficient movements of someone who knew their way around machinery. Alternators shot. Batteries dead. Could probably fix it with parts we don't have and time we shouldn't waste. I joined her at the hood. She was right. The alternator was toast. We walk. She looked at the road ahead, then at her ribs, then at the packs we would have to carry. This is going to suck. Welcome to the apocalypse. Everything sucks. We loaded up. I took the heavier pack. Astrid's wound meant she couldn't carry as much without risking the duct tape job coming apart. Shadow, naturally, carried nothing and looked smug about it. The walk was exactly as terrible as expected. The road wound up through dense forest, elevation climbing with each step. Astrid moved with gritted teeth determination, refusing to admit pain but unable to completely hide it. Every hour we stopped so she could rest and I could check the bandages. You don't have to hover, she said during one stop. I am not hovering. I am being professionally concerned. That is literally what hovering is. Well, excuse me for not wanting my duct tape masterpiece to fall apart. She smiled despite herself. Your duct tape masterpiece might be the only thing keeping my organs inside. See, hovering justified. We developed a rhythm over those 4 miles. I would walk slightly ahead, checking for infected or obstacles. Astrid would follow, conserving energy. calling out if she spotted anything I missed. Shadow ranged between us like a furry scout, occasionally disappearing into the underbrush to hunt. It was during one of these moments, Shadow off hunting, Astrid and I walking in comfortable silence, that we heard the engine. Both of us froze. A vehicle approaching from behind, the sound echoing off the trees. Off the road, Astrid hissed. We scrambled into the tree line just as a convoy came into view. 3 vehicles, a Jeep, a pickup, and a SUV that looked like it had been reinforced with sheet metal and prayer. All of them moving slowly, scanning the road, looking for something or someone. Through the trees, I could make out figures in the vehicles, armed, organized. And in the lead Jeep, driving, was a face I recognized from the brief moment before I had escaped the ravine. Silas. Astrid had gone absolutely still beside me, one hand on her pistol. I could see her jaw clenched, could practically feel the rage radiating off her. "That is him," she whispered. "That is Silas. I see him. He is tracking us. He has to be. There is no other reason he would be on this specific road." She was right. This wasn't a random patrol. This was hunting. The convoy passed slowly, scanning the forest. One of the men in the Jeep was looking at a tablet or GPS device, probably tracking something. Tracks, maybe, or the stolen truck we had abandoned. They passed our position without stopping, kept going north, toward the cabin. We waited until the sound of engines faded completely before moving back to the road. "They are going to find the cabin," Astrid said. "If they are tracking us, they will find it. Then we get there first, set up defenses." "With what?" "We have got 1 pistol, a bow with 4 arrows, and harsh language. Don't forget Shadow's intimidating meow." It wasn't funny, but we both laughed anyway. The kind of laugh that comes from stress and fear and the absurdity of the situation. "Seriously though," I said, "what is the play?" Astrid thought for a moment, that tactical mind working through options. "We get to the cabin, assess the situation. If they find us, we improvise. I am great at improvising. Ask my engineering professors. Did they pass you? Barely. But I did graduate, and I built a zombie-proof truck. So clearly the universe rewards improvisation. The truck that got stolen, minor detail. We picked up the pace, moving as fast as Astrid's wound allowed. The sun was setting by the time we crested the final hill and saw the cabin. It was exactly as I remembered, small, sturdy, sitting in a clearing with forest on all sides, solar panels on the roof, a well pump visible near the side, the storage shed still standing, no visible damage, no signs of infected or looters. It looked perfect, too perfect. "Something's wrong," Astrid said, echoing my thoughts. Yeah, Shadow had gone tense again. Her something's off posture. But not the infected warning. Something else. We approached carefully, Astrid with her pistol drawn, me with the bow. The cabin door was closed, but not locked. The deadbolt wasn't engaged. Someone had been here recently. I pushed the door open slowly. The interior was neat, clean, recently used. There was food on the counter, still fresh, a fire in the stove that had died recently, ash still warm. Someone had been living here, and they might come back. "We need to secure this place," Astrid said now, "before Silas's convoy gets here, before whoever's been living here returns, before anything else goes wrong." On it, we spent the next hour transforming the cabin. I reinforced the door with planks from the shed. Astrid rigged the windows with early warning systems, cans on strings, anything that would make noise if disturbed. We moved furniture to create defensive positions. Shadow supervised from the table, occasionally offering unhelpful commentary via meow. By nightfall, The cabin was as secure as we could make it with limited resources. We had found the emergency supplies my friend had stocked: food, water, medical gear, even ammunition. Whoever had been living here hadn't touched the hidden cache. Small victories. Astrid and I sat on the floor, backs against the wall, sharing a can of stew heated over the wood stove. Shadow curled between us, purring. "This is nice," I said quietly. "We are barricaded in a cabin, awaiting an attack from the man who murdered my team, with minimal weapons and no backup plan." "That is your definition of nice. Comparatively nice. We have walls, heat, food, cat." She smiled. "Fair point. The bar is pretty low these days." "To low bars," I raised my spoon in a mock toast. "To low bars," she echoed. We sat in comfortable silence, eating terrible canned stew, listening to Shadow purr. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, an engine sound. Could be Silas's convoy. Could be nothing. Either way, we were as ready as we would ever be. Astrid looked at me. "Ryder?" "Yeah. I am glad you didn't drive past me in Ridgemont. I am glad you didn't let those infected eat me. We make a good team. The temporarily not dead. The best team," I agreed. Shadow meowed. Whether in agreement or protest, we couldn't tell. But in that moment, with walls around us and darkness outside, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we had found something worth fighting for: each other. The engines came just before dawn. Astrid woke me with a hand over my mouth, which was frankly terrifying until I realized why. Through the window, I could see headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. 3 vehicles, moving slowly up the access road. Shadow was already at the window, tail puffed, ears flat. Her low growl said everything. "Danger incoming." "How long?" I whispered. 5 minutes. Astrid was already moving, checking her pistol, securing her tactical vest. Despite the fresh bandages, she moved like a soldier. "We need to decide, fight or run." I looked around the cabin. 1 door, 3 windows, no back exit. The forest was close, but we would have to cross open ground to reach it. And Astrid's wound meant she couldn't run far or fast. "We fight," I said. "We have got the defensive position against 3 vehicles and probably 8 to 10 armed men." "The math doesn't work, Ryder." "Since when does the math ever work for us?" The convoy stopped about 50 yards out. Engines idling, waiting. Then a voice, amplified by a megaphone, or just carried by the still morning air. "Astrid, I know you are in there. And your friend with the nice truck. Well, the truck we have now, Silas." Astrid's knuckles went white on her pistol grip. "Here is how this is going to work," Silas continued, his voice casual, almost friendly. "You come out, hands up. We have a conversation about why you thought playing dead would actually work. And maybe I let you die quick." "He is bluffing," I whispered. "He wouldn't waste ammunition on a conversation." "He is not bluffing. Silas doesn't bluff. He makes examples." Astrid moved to the window, peering out. "I count 5 men, rifles, shotguns. They are spreading out, taking positions." "What about vehicles?" "Standard pattern. They will use them for cover and mobile assault." "This isn't Silas's first siege." "Great. We were barricaded in a cabin, outnumbered and outgunned, by a psychopath with military experience. Any chance your survival economics speech works on him?" I asked. "I tried that once. Right before he shot Martinez." Her voice was cold. "He said the weak getting culled was just Darwinism." Shadow hissed at the window. Through it, I could see movement: Silas's men taking position behind vehicles, in the tree line, creating a perimeter. "We need a plan," Astrid said. I looked around the cabin. Limited weapons, limited ammunition, but I had survived this long by being creative with limited resources. The propane tanks, I said suddenly. For the stove and the generator. Where are they? Outside near the shed. Why? Because Silas taught me something valuable about survival economics. I started gathering materials, rope from the emergency supplies, the lighter from my pocket strips of cloth. Sometimes the best defense is making the other guy's strategy untenable. Understanding dawned on Astrid's face. You want to create an explosion. I want to create options. Right now, they have all the power. They know where we are. They have superior numbers and firepower. We are rats in a box. I tied cloth strips to arrows. But if we change the battlefield, create chaos, force them to react instead of act, maybe we survive long enough to escape. That is a terrible plan. You have a better one. She thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. Actually, no. Let's make some chaos. Over the next 10 minutes, we worked with the desperate efficiency of people who knew they were probably going to die. I explained the plan such as it was, and Astrid refined it with her tactical experience. The propane tanks became improvised, explosives not sophisticated, not reliable, but potentially effective. We would use the remaining fuel in the truck I had salvaged to create a perimeter fire. The bow and arrows, wrapped in fuel-soaked cloth, would be our long-range option. It was stupid, dangerous, and likely to get us killed. Perfect apocalypse planning, Astrid. Silas called again, running out of patience here. You know how I get when I am impatient. Yeah, Astrid muttered, checking her pistol one more time. People die. She moved to the window, keeping to the side, and yelled back. Silas, let's talk about your daddy issues instead. A pause then. What? You heard me. All this alpha male posturing. This strong survives bullshit. We both know you are compensating for something. What was it? Dad didn't love you. Couldn't make it past sergeant. Performance issues. I stared at her. What are you doing? Making him angry. Angry people make mistakes. From outside, you really want to die slow, don't you? I want to understand. See, I thought we were family, thought we had each other's backs, but then you decided playing dictator was more fun than being a decent human. So I am trying to figure out, when exactly did you become such a little bitch? Definitely making him angry. I could hear it in his response. The friendly tone cracking. Last chance, Astrid. Come out or we burn you out. Promises. Promises. Then the shooting started. Bullets punched through the cabin walls, splintering wood, shattering the windows. Astrid and I hit the floor, Shadow diving under the bed with the wise instinct of a creature who knew when to get small. Light it, Astrid shouted over the gunfire. I grabbed the bow, lit the first arrow, and sent it flying through the broken window toward the propane tanks we had repositioned near Silas's vehicles. My aim was terrible. The arrow landed short, but the fuel trail I had laid wasn't. The fire caught, racing toward the tanks with hungry speed. Silas's men saw it, started shouting warnings, scrambling away from their cover. The first tank went up with a concussion that shook the cabin's foundation. Not a Hollywood explosion, more of an aggressive fey-wump-fey followed by a fireball. But it was enough. The vehicles, including my stolen cruiser, were in the blast radius. The Jeep's tire caught fire. The SUV's hood erupted in flames. Chaos. Beautiful, desperate chaos. Now, Astrid grabbed my arm and we were moving. Out the back window, the one I had reinforced less thoroughly, planning ahead, into the forest beyond. Behind us, Silas's men were shouting, trying to contain the fire, assess casualties. Someone was screaming. The gunfire had stopped for now. We ran, Astrid clutching her side but keeping pace. Shadow, a flash of orange ahead of us. The forest swallowed us, trees providing cover, the pre-dawn darkness our ally. A quarter-mile in, we stopped, pressed against a massive Douglas fir, breathing hard. Did we just? I started. blow up your truck, destroy a cabin, and piss off a psychopath with a revenge fixation. Astrid finished. Yeah, we did. Was that a good plan or a terrible plan? Both Shadow meowed from somewhere above us. We looked up. She was on a branch, looking down with an expression that clearly said, "Took you long enough." Asterisk behind us. We could hear Silas shouting orders. The fire was still burning, painting the dawn sky orange. But the gunfire hadn't resumed. Maybe they were regrouping. Maybe they thought we died in the explosion. Or maybe Silas was just getting started. "We need to move," Astrid said. "He will track us." "Where?" "Away, fast." "Far." We moved deeper into the forest, leaving behind the cabin, the supplies, the hope of a safe haven. All we had was what we carried, each other, and a cat who seemed unimpressed with our survival skills. But we were alive for now. We had been running for 2 hours when Astrid collapsed, not dramatically, just sat down against a tree and refused to get up. "Ryder, stop." I turned back. She was pale, breathing hard. One hand pressed against her ribs where blood was seeping through the bandages. "We have to keep moving. Silas can go to hell. I am done running." She looked at me with exhausted determination. "We need to make a stand here. Here. We are in the middle of nowhere with no cover, no supplies, no exactly. So let's change that." She pulled out the map we had salvaged from the cabin, spread it on the ground. "We are here. About 3 miles from the cabin. This area," she pointed to a narrow canyon marked on the map, "is a bottleneck. Steep sides. Single access route. Perfect for a defensive position. Perfect for getting trapped, you mean? Or perfect for forcing Silas to come at us on our terms?" She looked up at me. "Ryder, we cannot keep running. My wound's getting worse. You are exhausted. Shadow's probably plotting our deaths. We need to end this. By fighting 5 armed men in a canyon. By using the terrain to our advantage. By making Silas commit to a position where his numbers don't matter as much." She traced the canyon on the map. "Narrow approach we set up at the far end. Create choke points. Force them to funnel in. Use what we have: fire, improvised weapons, surprise." I looked at the map, then at her, then at Shadow, who was sitting on a rock looking surprisingly attentive. "You realize this is insane," I said. "I realize we are going to die either way. This way, we at least take the bastard with us. Cheerful, realistic." I sat down next to her, looked at the map more carefully. She was right. Tactically, it was our best option. Maybe our only option. Running would just delay the inevitable, and Astrid couldn't run much longer anyway. "Okay," I said. "We make our stand. But we do it smart. Use everything we have learned." Over the next hour we made our way to the canyon. It was exactly as the map described. Narrow, steep-sided with a single access point. The far end had a cluster of boulders that would provide cover. Trees along the ridgeline could be used for positioning. We got to work. First inventory, Astrid's pistol. Maybe 20 rounds. My bow, 3 arrows left. The lighter, rope, a folding knife. Some rations, water bottles. Not exactly an arsenal. "We need to get creative," I said. Story of our lives. I started gathering materials from the forest: dry branches, pine needles, anything flammable. Astrid, moving slower but focused, began rigging tripwires and noise traps along the canyon approach. Shadow supervised by sitting on a boulder and judging our work ethic. "Tripwires will not stop them," I pointed out. "No, but they will slow them down. Make noise. Give us warning." She tied off another can filled with rocks. Every second matters. While she worked on early warning systems, I focused on weapons, or more accurately, weapon-adjacent items. I fashioned spears from branches, crude but pointed. created a rock pile that could be pushed down on anyone approaching, even rigged a basic slingshot from elastic cord I had salvaged. MacGyver would have been proud or horrified. Probably both. "You know what is funny?" Astrid said, taking a water break. "A month ago, I was scheduling supply deliveries and arguing with bureaucrats about budget allocations. Now, I am rigging booby traps and preparing to die in a canyon. That is one definition of funny. What were you doing a month ago?" I thought back. It felt like a lifetime. Loading my truck for a vacation, planning 2 weeks of solitude and self-discovery. Maybe some light fishing. How would that work out? Found a cat and a soldier with trust issues. So, better than expected. She smiled. Actually smiled. "You are an optimist. Someone has to be." We worked through the afternoon, preparing our defensive position. The reality of the situation settled over us gradually. This wasn't about winning. This was about making our stand, taking Silas with us if possible, and not going quietly into the night. As the sun started to set, we took stock of our work. The canyon was as ready as it would ever be. Trip wires across the approach. Fire pits positioned for maximum chaos. Cover positions marked. Escape routes, theoretical identified. Astrid and I sat in our defensive position, backs against the boulders. Shadow between us. "I never thanked you," Astrid said quietly, "for not leaving me in Ridgemont. You saved me first." "Yeah, but you could have left me in that cabin. Or any time after you didn't. Duct tape marriage proposal, remember?" "I am committed." She laughed, then winced, clutching her ribs. "God, don't make me laugh. It hurts. Sorry." We sat in silence for a moment. The canyon was peaceful. Just whined through the trees and shadows purring rider. "If we don't make it, we will make it. But if we don't, I want you to know." She struggled for words. "You gave me something I thought I had lost. After Silas, after my team died, I thought trust was just a liability. But you and Shadow, you reminded me that people can still be decent, even at the end of the world." I didn't know what to say to that, so I did what felt right, put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me carefully, mindful of both our injuries. "We are going to make it," I said with more confidence than I felt. "We are going to survive this. Find another cabin, and spend the rest of our lives being moderately traumatized but alive. That is the dream." Shadow meowed, stood up, and stared toward the canyon entrance. Her ears went flat. "They are here," Astrid said, reading Shadow the way I had learned to. We got into position. Astrid behind the right boulder, pistol ready. Me behind the left, bow in hand. Shadow disappeared into a crevice in the rocks, smart enough to stay out of the line of fire. Headlights appeared at the canyon entrance. 3 vehicles, moving slowly. They stopped just outside the narrow passage, engines idling. Then Silas's voice carried on the still evening air. "Astrid Ryder, I know you are in there. Nice choice. Good defensive position. I am almost impressed." Astrid and I exchanged glances. "But here is the thing," Silas continued. "I have got all the time in the world. I have got resources, ammunition, men. You have got what? A pistol, a prayer, and a really angry cat," I shouted back. "Don't forget the cat." A pause. Then, "Who is the comedian?" "That would be me, Ryder Holt, automotive engineer, part-time cat dad, full-time pain in your ass. Cute Astrid, your new friend has a mouth on him." "Yeah," Astrid called out. "It is one of his better features. That and his ability to rig propane tank explosives. You enjoy those?" Another pause, longer this time. When Silas spoke again, the friendly tone was gone. "You cost me 2 vehicles and a man. That is expensive. So here is how this ends. You come out, hands up, and I make it quick. Or you stay in there, and I make it slow. Your choice. Option 3, I shouted. You drive away and we pretend this never happened. Not an option. Then I guess we are at an impasse. The first gunshot cracked through the air, the bullet sparking off the boulder near my head. Not a warning shot, a real attempt. Or not an impasse, I muttered, ducking lower. Here we go, Astrid said, checking her pistol one more time. Whatever happens, we are going out together, I finished, the temporarily not dead, all the way to the end. Shadow meowed from her hiding spot. Whether in support or complaint, we couldn't tell. The engines revved. Silas's convoy was moving into the canyon, and we were ready, or as ready as two wounded survivors with minimal weapons and maximum stubbornness could be. Time to make our stand. The first vehicle into the canyon, the pickup, hit our tripwire at exactly the wrong speed. The cans erupted in noise. The wire caught in the wheel well, and the driver overcorrected. The truck slammed into the canyon wall with a satisfying crunch. 1 down. I called to Astrid, 4 to go. The other vehicle stopped. Assessing Silas's voice crackled over what sounded like a radio. Careful. They are playing games. I lit the first arrow, my second to last, and sent it flying toward the fuel trail we had laid. My aim was still terrible, but I was learning. Terrible aim plus fire equals effective anyway. The flames raced along the trail toward the disabled pickup. The men inside scrambled out just before the gas tank caught. The explosion was smaller this time, no propane tanks, but enough to create smoke and chaos. Now, Astrid fired 3 precise shots, forcing Silas's men to take cover. The next phase was pure improvisation. I pushed the rock pile we had positioned, sending stones tumbling down the canyon slope. Not lethal, but distracting and dangerous enough to make Silas's crew hesitate. They returned fire, and that is when things got real. Bullets everywhere, ricocheting off rocks, punching through trees, kicking up dirt. Astrid and I pressed low, trying to make ourselves small targets. Shadow, wisely, stayed in her crevice. They are flanking, Astrid shouted, pointing to movement along the ridgeline. 2 of Silas's men were climbing, trying to get above us. Smart tactics, terrible for our survival chances. I grabbed the slingshot. I had made rubber surgical tubing from the first aid kit, a piece of leather for the pouch, and loaded it with a rock. The physics of slingshots are actually pretty simple. Tension, trajectory, hope. I let it fly. The rock hit the climber in the shoulder. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but surprising enough to make him lose his grip. He slid down the slope, cursing creatively. Lucky shot, Astrid called. All skill. Keep telling yourself that. The firefight intensified. Silas had committed now, pushing his men into the canyon despite our defenses. He was betting on numbers and firepower overwhelming our position. He was probably right, but we weren't going down easy. I used my last arrow, this one without fire, and managed to hit the front tire of the SUV trying to push forward. It didn't stop the vehicle, but it forced the driver to slow down, giving Astrid a better shot at the windshield. Her bullet spider webbed the glass. The SUV jerked to a stop. We are not going to win this, Astrid said, voice tight. They just keep coming. Then we changed the game again. The remaining fuel cans we had saved, 2 for emergencies, were our last major assets. I grabbed them both, felt their weight, and made a decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. Probably suicidal. Cover me, I shouted, then ran. Ryder. What the hell? I ran toward the disabled SUV, fuel cans in hand, using the smoke from the burning pickup as cover. Bullets chewed up the ground around me. Something hot creased my shoulder, a near miss that hurt like hell but didn't stop me. I reached the SUV, dumped both fuel cans underneath, and lit them with the lighter. Then I ran back, faster than I had ever run in my life. The SUV went up in flames, the fire spreading to the Jeep parked too close beside it. More explosions, more chaos, more screaming. I dove behind the boulders next to Astrid, breathing hard, shoulder bleeding. "You are insane," she said. "Thanks." That wasn't a compliment. The smoke was thick now, covering the canyon in a gray haze. Through it I could see Silas's remaining men regrouping, taking cover, reassessing. They had lost 2 vehicles, probably a man or 2 injured, and we were still fighting. But we were almost out of ammunition. Astrid had maybe 5 rounds left. I had rocks and improvised weapons. The fuel was gone. We were running on empty. That is when I heard it. The sound that had haunted my nightmares for weeks. Moaning, lots of it, through the smoke, shapes appeared, stumbling, shambling, drawn by the noise and the fire and the smell of blood, infected. Dozens of them. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I said. The infected didn't discriminate. They fell on Silas's men first. The ones in the open, the ones already wounded and bleeding. The screaming started immediately. Silas was shouting orders, trying to rally his men. But it was chaos, infected swarming from multiple directions, drawn by the perfect storm of noise and scent. "We need to move," Astrid said. "Now, while they are distracted." "Where?" "Anywhere, but here." We grabbed our packs, whistled for Shadow, and started moving along the canyon wall, staying low, using the smoke and chaos as cover. Behind us, the battle had turned into a nightmare. Silas's men fighting infected, fighting each other in panic, the fire spreading. I caught a glimpse of Silas himself, standing on the hood of a half-burned vehicle, firing his pistol methodically at infected. He saw us. Our eyes met across the chaos. Even at that distance, even through the smoke, I could see his expression. Pure rage run. Astrid grabbed my arm, and we were moving, scrambling up the canyon side, finding handholds and footholds, climbing desperately. Shadow appeared beside us, somehow already at the top, looking down like we were disappointing her. Gunshots behind us. Silas was shooting at us now, ignoring the infected, focused on revenge even as his position fell apart. A bullet spanged off the rock near my hand. Another hit the dirt beside Astrid's boot. We reached the top and rolled over the edge, into the forest beyond. Below us, the canyon was a war zone. Fire, infected, panicked men. I couldn't tell who was winning. Did we just, I started, survive? Maybe. Astrid clutched her ribs, blood soaking through her tactical vest. "Ask me in 5 minutes." We moved deeper into the forest, putting distance between us and the chaos. Behind us, the sounds of fighting continued. Gunfire, screaming. The wet, awful sounds of infected feeding. We had escaped, barely. But Silas, I didn't know if he had survived. Didn't know if the infected had gotten him or if he had fought his way clear. All I knew was that we were alive, moving and not stopping until we couldn't hear the screams anymore. Shadow led the way, tail high, unbothered by the fact that we had just orchestrated the goriest 3-way battle in apocalypse history. "That was the worst plan ever," Astrid said, breathing hard. "But we are alive. That doesn't make it a good plan." "Sure it does. That is my entire planning philosophy. Succeed despite terrible ideas." She almost laughed. Almost. We kept moving through the darkness, leaving the canyon behind, heading nowhere in particular except away. Behind us, the fighting sounds gradually faded. Whether anyone survived that nightmare, I didn't know. Right now, I didn't care. We were alive together. And that was enough. We walked through the night in silence, too exhausted for conversation, too wired from adrenaline to stop moving. Shadow ranged ahead, alert, guiding us away from danger with her uncanny instinct for safe routes. Around dawn, Astrid finally collapsed. Not the sit down and rest kind of collapse. The full body shutdown kind. I caught her before she hit the ground, lowered her carefully against a tree. Her vest was soaked with blood. The wound had reopened completely during our escape. Her face was pale, lips almost blue. "Stay with me," I said, pulling out what was left of our medical supplies. So tired, she mumbled, "Cannot I just sleep?" "Absolutely not. You sleep, you die. Those are the rules." I cut away her vest and shirt, assessed the damage. The duct tape bandage had held remarkably well considering everything we had been through. But the wound underneath had torn wider. I needed to close it properly, and I had exactly zero medical training for this. Shadow sat beside us, watching with those green eyes. For once, she seemed concerned instead of judgmental. "Okay," I said, more to myself than Astrid. "First aid, YouTube videos. Don't panic." I cleaned the wound as best I could with our remaining water and antiseptic, used the emergency suture kit I had found in the cabin supplies. Thank God for preppers, and started closing the gash. My hand shook so bad the first 3 attempts failed. Ryder Astrid said softly, "Yeah, if I don't make it, you are making it, but if I don't, tell Shadow she was a good cat. Tell her yourself and hold still." The next hour was the longest of my life. Each stitch felt like it took forever. Astrid drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally squeezing my hand so hard I thought bones would break. But I got it done. The wound closed, bandaged properly this time, with actual medical tape instead of duct tape. Astrid opened her eyes, looked down at her ribs. "You did it. Don't sound so surprised." "I am surprised. You just performed field surgery with shaking hands and no training." "YouTube. It is good for everything except social interaction." She tried to laugh, then groaned. "Don't make me laugh ever again, deal." I collapsed next to her, utterly exhausted. Shadow climbed onto my lap, then onto Astrid's chest, then back to my lap, like she couldn't decide who needed supervision more. "We made it," Astrid said quietly. "Yeah, against Silas, against the infected, against everything. We got lucky. We got each other." She turned her head to look at me. "That is better than luck." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand. We stayed there as the sun rose, painting the forest gold. In the distance, I could hear birds, actual birds, doing bird things, completely unconcerned with the apocalypse. "I lost everything," Astrid said after a while. "My team, my purpose, my trust in people. And now, I have a cat and a guy with terrible planning skills. It is not much, but," she squeezed my hand, "it is something. Hey, my planning skills got us this far." This far includes multiple near-death experiences, and what I am pretty sure was illegal use of propane tanks. Minor details. We sat in comfortable silence. Shadow purred, warm and content between us. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Rest. Heal. Figure out where to go from here. I mean longer term, the cabin's gone. Silas might still be alive. We are in the middle of nowhere with minimal supplies. Then we find another cabin, or build one, or just keep moving until we find somewhere safe." She looked at me. "Together." "Together," I agreed. Shadow meowed, apparently approving of this plan. Over the next 2 days, we camped in that spot. I hunted badly but managed to catch enough small game to supplement our MRE rations. Shadow hunted too, more successfully. Astrid slept, woke up, slept again. her body slowly healing. I kept watch, checking her wound every few hours, changing bandages, making sure infection didn't set in. On the third day, she was strong enough to sit up on her own. "You know what I realized?" she said, watching me try to start a fire. "That my fire-starting skills are terrible. No, well, yes, but that is not the point." She paused. "I realized that the world ended, but life didn't. We are still here, still fighting, still caring about each other despite every reason not to." That is surprisingly philosophical. Almost dying makes you philosophical. I got the fire started finally, and we sat warming ourselves. Shadow sprawled between us like a furry bridge. "Ryder," Astrid said quietly. "Yeah, when I was unconscious, you could have left. Taken the supplies, moved faster without me weighing you down. That is not who I am, I know. That is why I am saying this." She looked at me seriously. "Thank you for being exactly who you are, for not becoming what this world wants us to become." I thought about that, about Silas and his survival economics, about the young couple I had tried to save, about every choice I had made since Portland, I think. I said slowly that we don't survive just to survive. We survive to stay human, to keep the parts of us that matter. And which parts matter? The parts that save strangers, that adopt stray cats, that refuse to give up even when the math says we should. I looked at her. The parts that care about people despite the cost. She smiled. "That is a terrible survival strategy. Good thing we are terrible at survival. We are alive, aren't we? Despite our best efforts." We sat there as night fell, our fire crackling, shadow purring, and for the first time since the world ended, I felt something like peace. Not because we were safe we weren't, not because we had a plan we didn't, but because we had each other. And in this new world, that counted for everything. The cabin we found 3 weeks later wasn't much a hunting shack. Really, barely more than 4 walls and a roof. But it had a well, a wood stove, and most importantly, no previous occupants, human or otherwise. "It needs work," Astrid said, surveying the interior. "Everything needs work. That is the apocalypse aesthetic. I am serious. The roof's going to leak in the rain. Windows are broken. Door doesn't lock, so we fix it. With what tools?" I grinned. "You are talking to an automotive engineer with too much time and a dangerous amount of confidence. Watch and learn." Over the next month, we transformed that shack into something livable. I scavenged materials from abandoned structures, wood, nails, tools, even glass to replace the broken windows. Astrid used her military logistics training to organize everything, creating systems for food storage, water purification, defense planning. Shadow supervised by napping in sunbeams, and occasionally bringing us dead things. "Do you think," Astrid asked one evening while we worked on reinforcing the walls, "that we will ever stop waiting for the next disaster?" Probably not. Hypervigilance is the new normal. That is exhausting. Yeah, I hammered another board into place. But at least we are exhausted together. She smiled at that. We had been doing that more smiling, joking, finding moments of lightness in the endless gray of survival. Her wound had healed to a scar, and while she moved more carefully now, she was strong again. We worked well together. My engineering problem-solving paired with her tactical planning. My optimism balanced her realism. We covered each other's blind spots. And somewhere along the way, partnership became something more. It happened gradually. Small moments that built into something bigger. The way she'd check on me when I was too focused on a project. The way I would make sure she ate and rested. The way we had fallen into a rhythm of shared tasks and comfortable silence. The way we looked at each other when we thought the other wasn't watching. One night, About 6 weeks after finding the cabin, I was outside checking the perimeter when Astrid joined me. "Cannot sleep?" I asked. "Got used to your snoring. It is too quiet without it." "I don't snore." "You absolutely snore." "Shadow complains about it." "Shadow's a cat. She doesn't complain, she judges." Astrid leaned against me, and I put my arm around her shoulders. We stood like that, watching the stars through the trees. "I never thanked you," she said quietly, "for everything, for not leaving me, for fixing me up, for believing we could do this. You thanked me like 5 times already. Humor me. I am trying to have a moment." I smiled. "Okay, you are welcome for all of it. And thanks for saving me in Ridgemont, for teaching me how to actually defend a position, for being someone worth surviving with. Worth surviving with. That is your version of romantic. This is me being romantic." "You want poetry?" asked Shadow. She laughed, then turned to face me. "Ryder, I mean it. You gave me something I thought was gone forever." "What is that?" "Hope, trust, a reason to give a damn about tomorrow." We kissed. It was tentative at first. Both of us unsure. Both of us scarred in more ways than one. But then it deepened, became something more: connection, affirmation, 2 people choosing each other, despite every reason not to. When we pulled apart, Shadow was sitting nearby, watching us with an expression that could only be described as smug. "The cat approves," I said. "Of course she does. She has been trying to parent trap us for weeks." "Wait, really?" "Ryder. She literally herds us together. Sleeps between us so we have to move closer. Meows whenever we are apart too long." I looked at Shadow. "You little matchmaker." Shadow yawned, stretched, and walked back toward the cabin like her work was done. "She is ridiculous," Astrid said fondly. "She is perfect." We followed Shadow inside, the cabin warm from the wood stove, our combined supplies neatly organized, everything we had built together surrounding us. That night, for the first time since the world ended, I felt like I was home. Not because of the walls or the roof, because of who I was with. Astrid curled against me, Shadow sprawled across us both, and we slept the sleep of people who had finally stopped running. The weeks that followed fell into a routine. We fortified the cabin, proper barriers, early warning systems, escape routes, hunted and foraged for food, maintained our gear, planned for winter. But we also lived, told stories by the fire, taught each other skills, found moments of joy in small things: a successful hunt, Shadow doing something ridiculous, the first snow of the season. One evening, Astrid asked, "Do you ever think about the future? Like, real future? Not just survive the next week future?" "Sometimes I think about what happens when we are not just surviving, when we can actually build something lasting." "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe find other survivors. Start a community. Something more than just the 2 of us and a judgmental cat hiding in the woods." 3 of us, I corrected. "Shadow's an equal partner in this operation." Shadow meowed from her spot on the windowsill. "See, she agrees." Astrid smiled, but her eyes were serious. "I mean it, though. We cannot hide forever. Eventually, we will need more than just each other. You tired of me already?" "Never. But I am thinking longer term. What happens when we need medical care we cannot provide, or specialized supplies, or just human connection beyond survival partners?" I thought about it. She was right. We had been so focused on immediate survival that we hadn't thought about what came next. "Okay," I said, "so we scout carefully. See if there are other survivors nearby. Build connections, but we stay cautious. Silas is probably still out there." "Silas?" Astrid's voice went flat. "Yeah, I think about him sometimes. Wonder if he survived the canyon. You want him to have survived? I want to know. Not knowing means always looking over my shoulder. We will figure it out together. Together, she agreed, taking my hand. 3 months after finding the cabin, we had established something that looked almost like normalcy. The place was secure, well-stocked, comfortable. We had routines, systems, a life. And each other. One morning, I woke to find Astrid already up, standing at the window, watching the sunrise. "You okay?" I asked, joining her. I was just thinking about my team, about everything that happened, nightmares. Actually the opposite. I was remembering the good parts before Silas. When we were actually a team that cared about each other. She leaned against me, and I realized something. They would want me to move on, to build something new instead of staying stuck in grief. "You have moved on. Look at what we have built here." "We," she said, emphasizing the word. That is the part I never expected, to find someone who actually gave a damn. Who saw me at my worst and stuck around anyway. Right back at you. We stood there. Shadow joining us at the window. The three of us watching the world wake up, Ryder. "Yeah, if we do this, if we start reaching out, building connections, promise me something." "What?" "Promise we don't lose this. What we have, the trust, the partnership, all of it. I promise. You, me, and our emotionally manipulative cat. That is the foundation. Everything else builds from there." Shadow meowed, probably objecting to emotionally manipulative, but it was accurate. Astrid kissed me. "Deal. Let's build something worth defending." And we did. 3 months since the outbreak, 90 days of hell, transformation, and somehow coming out the other side, still breathing. I sat on the cabin's porch as the winter sun set. Shadow sprawled across my lap, Astrid inside preparing dinner from our carefully rationed supplies. The world had ended, but life, stubborn, persistent life, continued. I have been keeping these audio logs, partly as documentation, partly as therapy. Partly because someday someone might find them and need to know that survival is possible, that humanity survived. Even when humanity seemed like a liability. I thought a lot about who I was before. The guy loading his truck in Portland, running from divorce and disappointment, seeking solitude and peace. That person feels like a stranger now. The outbreak took everything familiar and burned it away. My old life. My certainties, my belief that preparation and planning could control outcomes. It took the world I knew and replaced it with something harder, stranger, infinitely more dangerous. But it also gave me things I never expected. Astrid appeared in the doorway, 2 bowls of our makeshift stew in hand. She would put on weight since those first desperate weeks. Her face less gaunt, her movements confident despite the scar on her ribs. She looked alive. "Dinner's ready. And if you make a joke about my cooking, I am feeding yours to Shadow." "Your cooking is wonderful," I said diplomatically, liar. But a sweet liar. She sat beside me, handed over a bowl. Shadow immediately abandoned my lap for hers, always following the food. We ate in comfortable silence, watching the forest darken. Somewhere out there, infected still wandered. Somewhere, people like Silas still survived, choosing violence over humanity. The world remained broken and dangerous. But here, on this porch, with this woman and this ridiculous cat, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Content. "I have been thinking," Astrid said, setting aside her empty bowl, "about what you asked, about the future. And I think we should do it. Start scouting, looking for other survivors. Carefully, obviously, but we cannot hide here forever." I nodded. Agreed. Spring, maybe. When travel's easier and we have built up more supplies. Spring works. She looked at me. You scared, terrified, but also hopeful. Is that weird? It is realistic. Fear and hope aren't opposites. They are partners. Shadow meowed, reminding us she existed and demanded attention. You know what I learned? I asked, scratching Shadow's ears. Through all of this, that cats are secretly preparing for world domination. Well, yes, but also that the world ending didn't mean life ending. We are still here, still caring about each other, still building towards something, even if we don't know exactly what. That is very philosophical. Almost dying makes you philosophical. Someone told me that once. She smiled, took my hand. Ryder, whatever happens next, whether we find other survivors or spend years alone up here, I want you to know something. What is that? You saved me. Not just in Ridgemont. Not just with medical treatment. You saved the part of me that believed people could be decent. That trust was possible. That love could exist even at the end of everything. I didn't trust my voice, so I just pulled her closer. So thank you, she continued, for being stubborn enough to help a stranger, for being foolish enough to keep trying, for being exactly the person I needed to find. Right back at you, I managed. All of its shadow pressed between us, purred loud enough to drown out my thoughts. We sat there as darkness fell completely. 3 survivors against the world. And I realized something. We had lost everything: cities, security, the belief that tomorrow was guaranteed, friends, family, the entire structure of civilization. But we had gained each other, and shadow, and skills we never knew we needed, and the knowledge that humans could choose connection, even when survival suggested isolation. The world had ended. But we were still here. If you are hearing this recording, if you are out there somewhere surviving, trying to find your way in this new world, remember this: the world ended, but life didn't. People can still be decent. Trust can still be rebuilt. Love can still exist in the ruins. Find your people, protect them. Build something worth defending, even if it is just a cabin in the woods with makeshift fortifications, and a cat with delusions of grandeur. Stay alive, stay human. And remember, you are not alone out there. Somewhere, others are fighting the same fight, building the same kind of fragile hope from the wreckage. We made it this far. You can too. This is Ryder Holt, signing off. Stay safe out there. And if you have learned anything from my mistakes in God, there were so many mistakes, leave a comment. Tell me your story. Tell me you are alive, because that is what matters now. Not survival for its own sake, but survival for each other. I turned off the recorder, set it aside. Astrid rested her head on my shoulder. Shadow curled between us, purring like a diesel engine, completely unconcerned with the profound moment we were having. The stars came out, brilliant in the absence of light pollution. The forest whispered around us. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Tomorrow we would scout the perimeter, check the traps, plan for winter. Think about spring and what came next. Tonight we'd sit on this porch, the 3 of us, and just exist. Scarred but healing, traumatized but together, alive against all odds. The last road north had brought me here to this cabin, this woman, this cat. It had taken everything, and given me things I never knew I needed. And sitting there, watching the stars with Astrid beside me and Shadow purring against my chest, I realized something. I was home. Not in the building sense, the cabin was just walls and a roof, but home in the way that mattered, with people worth surviving for. The world that remained was broken, dangerous, uncertain. But we were in it together, and that made all the difference. End author's note. If you enjoyed Ryder, Astrid, and Shadow's story, please leave a comment below. In this new world, stories and connections are what keep us human. Stay safe out there. Okay, so I just finished writing this and I am sitting here like, did that really just happen? Like honestly, I don't even know if real life gets this messy, but here we are. Not gonna lie though. It was so satisfying to write. Total karma is real vibes. But seriously, what do you guys think about how this all went down? Was the main character justified, or did they take it too far? I am genuinely curious what y'all think. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button. It really helps me out. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next drama-filled story. See you in the comments.